the Titanic is, 13,000 feet. That is like over 2 miles,
2.5
correct?
miles, yeah.
Yeah, the kind of pressure that's experienced at that level on the ship itself and anything else, including the submersible was down there, it would equal to a tower of solid lead rising to the height of the Empire State Building.
That's unbelievable.
So the pressure is absolutely enormous. Now, they did say, in terms of the submersible, that there's some ballast that they can let off this
What,
submersible.
so they'd float to the...
So it could possibly...
If they were to find it.
Yes, or if they did it themselves, if they could.
Oh, I see.
But they have not. People have been looking for this on top, kind of bobbing about on top of the ocean. But if not, then this is what they fear, that there's some sort of, it either is tangled on some other wreckage, maybe it's Titanic or something else, or that there's some kind of hole.
Or maybe
in the
couldn't take
vessel.
the pressure that you're describing.
Yep.
By the way, I did not know, till we were talking to our colleagues Jamie and Zoe this morning, about the oddness of this vessel itself. Here is some sound from a CBS News report, which aired in December of last year. The reporter, David Pogue, describes essentially this jerry-rigged approach to Ocean Gate's submersibles. Here he is.
I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
By the way, the guy who is saying those things about off-the-shelf components and a game controller, which we saw a video of, is the CEO of the company Stockton Rush. 877-301-8970. By the way, we don't know anything more than you do about the status of the search. We do know that there are reportedly 96 hours of breathable air, and apparently they lost contact Sunday morning, so the time is running. But we want to know...
We know it's the size of a minivan.
Yeah,
that is not
big
a lot
minivan.
of room for 5 people to be down there for that length of time. There's not enough room to really move around or stand up completely and so forth.
But by the way, since we don't know much about it, and we obviously wish them the best, it isn't so much talk about their fate. It's more to talk about, would you do this kind of thing? Putting money aside, I mean, the vast majority of us don't have 250 grand to go underwater to the Titanic or 450 grand to get on Richard Branson's thing. But assuming the money was taken care of, is this something you'd want to do and be willing to take the risk to do? At 877-301-8970. Would you do either?
No, absolutely not. Would you?
Well,
I don't even like to fly in an airplane.
I am relatively
getting a submersible.
cowardly, as you know. And I can't explain the following, so please don't ask a follow-up question. I would not do the underwater thing. I think I would do, even though maybe I'm fooling myself, I think I'd do the outer space thing. First of all, it's over in like 12 minutes. Don't they go up for like 12 minutes? They leave the Earth's atmosphere and then they come right back down or some such thing. That doesn't seem nearly as terrifying as the underwater thing does. But obviously, a lot of people want to do it. I think there are a lot of people who, well, obviously wealthy people too, who anteed up the 250 grand for either Jeff Bezos' ship or Branson's ship or something as soon as it was announced that they were going to be doing those kinds of things. So I think there's actually a lot of interest. 877-301-8970.
Remember the guy from Star Trek that got off the boat and he was like in tears? He was in his...
Oh, the 90-year-old.
Yeah.
What's his name?
William
Shatner, exactly.
He was
buoyant.
He was buoyant, and he talked about looking back on the Earth, and that's one of the neat things about that. Even though you're not there long, you're not that high, you are looking back.
You ever seen Anderson Cooper interview him, by the way? He interviewed him again right after that. He's 90-something years old. He is so full of life and so good.
I know. He must have taken vitamins or something.
Do you remember we played one of his albums on the air once? He also does singing, and I use the term advisedly. But he does. That's courageous, too. 877-301-8970. Where do you want to start, Marjorie?
Let's start with Don in Arlington. Hi, Don.
Hey, Don.
Hey, how are you? I think it's all about, like, your perceived risk of the event and your risk tolerance. Like, my kids are older now. I would do either or both of those in a second.
Really?
I wouldn't have done it when they were babies. And one thing that we didn't mention was, like, this going with Elon Musk in the Dragon. That is, I mean, there's 200 successful launches. The risk of that is pretty low. I do that without even...
What is the Musk thing? I'm embarrassed to say I'm not familiar with...
The Dragon, neither am I.
The only thing he does that I'm familiar with is the Tesla. Go ahead.
So the spaceship they developed to bring astronauts to the International Space Station, you can rent rides in it. And it's orders of magnitude more than these other things. It's about $20 million. But that thing's launched 200 times and not had a failure. So the risk of that's low.
So,
it's
but
probably a good one for power.
But Don, you were saying, well, that's what I am, so that'd probably be a good one for me if I come up with the 20 million. So you're saying unequivocally your kids are grown, you do this either in a second, even though there appears, sadly, to be a pretty bad outcome to what we've heard about the last few days. Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, a part of it all is doing your due diligence. I mean, if you looked at this submarine and you weren't comfortable. I mean, when you mentioned that using an off-the-shelf game controller, the first thing that went into my head is, what do they do if the game controller fails? Well, if they've got a way around that, like maybe there's two of them, or maybe you unplug it and plug a spare one in. But if they don't have an answer to that and other ideas that you come up with, then you don't do it. You got to feel safe.
So Don, before you leave, what have you done to date that would make us believe that you are capable of going 2 miles down in the ocean off Newfoundland?
I used to fly aerobatic formation flying with two.
Okay, you qualified. You're qualified, Don.
Fair enough, Don. Thank you for the call.
You sound like the kind of guy that would
What's
do this
the
sort of thing.
riskiest thing you've ever done, like in an adventure sort of way?
I can't think. I used to go scuba diving. I used to
that's
dive.
pretty risky.
Well, it was only, you're going 20 feet down.
Well, that's pretty impressive.
The more I read about sharks, the less I decided I would do it, but I used to do it. Listen to this
The
guy.
riskiest thing I think I've ever done, I'm just thinking as I was asking a question, the riskiest is I played miniature golf on a course where you had to climb up, I wouldn't say climb, you had to walk up a small mountain to get to the seventh hole.
So listen, one of the gentlemen that's on this boat is this guy, a British businessman. His name is Hamish Harding.
Yeah.
Listen to this guy's resume. He holds 3 Guinness World Records. The longest duration at full ocean depth by a crewed vessel. He's done that. In 2021, he and this ocean explorer dived to the lowest depth of the Mariana Trench. And last year, he went into space in Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket. So this is a man who clearly loves adventure, and we hope this works out for him, but it's not looking good at the moment.
Susan posts, she's watching on YouTube, you couldn't pay me $250,000 to get in that thing. That's actually a far better question than mine, is if you were paid, forget the free. If someone paid you a ton of dough, like that 250 grand, would you do it? I would not do the underwater thing.
Yeah, there's a father and son on board, too.
There is? Oh, I didn't know that.
Pakistani businessman.
Oh, yeah, I did know that, yeah.
Yeah. It's only his 3rd voyage, too, unlike these spaceships that have gone up and down a bunch of times.
What do you think of this? I mean, the guy literally says, we use these off-the-shelf components. This is the CEO. Mm-hmm. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game. And by the way, we saw the game controller on CNN this morning. He's not exaggerating. There's a game controller.
Absolutely. That's what it says in this story about it.
Well, that's what we saw, too.
The size of a minivan, operated with a single button, a video game-style controller, a makeshift toilet, and material also from an RV trailer.
Where'd you scuba dive?
Cape Cod.
Wow.
Well, I actually...
Scuba or...
with tanks.
Wow.
Yeah, I told you that.
No, I
don't
remember that. That's pretty bold.
Yes, I did that when I was
young. How long
young.
were you under there?
Oh, 15 minutes, half hour, something like that. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
It's not that exciting.
I snorkeled in a pool. I did. Scary. It was really scary, but I don't know what's wrong with me. I mean, is it in your genes or your upbringing when you don't have? I don't have that adventure gene.
Well, I don't
have.
find that daring, because if something goes wrong, you can just swim to the top. It's not going to, you can let go of the tanks and swim to the top. So it's not like it's a really.
Okay, fine.
I don't like being up in the air. I don't like that at all. Tim from New Hampshire. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Tim, welcome.
Good morning. I love your show. I've been listening for years.
Thank you.
So about the submarine thing, personally, I can't even handle an MRI.
You are my kind of guy, Tim. Keep going. Go ahead.
World that I would get in a 21-foot cylinder and descend 13,000 feet in the ocean. I won't even go to the bottom of my 4-foot above ground pool.
Tim, we have a horrible connection. We got to let you go, but I'm with you. Anyone ever been in an MRI? People been in an MRI here, everybody?
Yeah.
Just a few. An MRI is like being, I've had many, is like being wheeled into a tomb. And if you're a large person, your nose practically hits the top of the MRI. So it's literally like being in a casket. It is really claustrophobic, to say the least. Even though I don't want to scare people who need the medical procedure, each end is open. So you do sort of, at least psychologically, understand that you can escape, I guess, if you're as panicked as Tim and I are.
They do have a lot of documentaries. Well, I don't know if a lot, but they have several documentaries about the Titanic, and some of them you can see they go through what the rooms look like.
You mean since they found it?
Yes, since they found it. And I think it was 1985, I believe.
Know.
And it's really, obviously, very, very far down. Mary Lou in Brookline, thank you for calling.
Hey there, Mary Lou.
Hi, yes. As I was mentioning to your screener, I said to him, don't they feel bad for their loved ones they're leaving behind, knowing that they run a high risk of things going wrong, and you have to sign off on that before they'll let you on the submarine.
That's true.
Also, even more important, I think, are the facts that the taxpayers of Massachusetts are paying for the Coast Guard, and also maybe, Maine as well, for the Coast Guard to go out there and go hunting around for them round the clock. It sounds like it's a pretty, intensive procedure for all the Coast Guard crew to be looking for these, 5 people, when they should be.
Yeah, we got it. Well, it's also, there are two things. One, the first point, I think I agree with you. There's a selfishness aspect to this, Mary Lou, but the first caller sort of addressed it, at least for him, saying he would never have done it when his kids were little. Now that his kids were grown, obviously I assume they'd miss him. I don't know, but I assume it's a different dynamic. But Mary Lou, thanks for the call. Mary Lou raises a really interesting point, which is a little crass to continue with, but I'll do it anyway. You remember all these White Mountain rescues when people go when they shouldn't be doing it? My understanding is in certain circumstances, New Hampshire charges people who either violate the rules or take risks that are inappropriate.
And irresponsible camping, climbing, going without your gear. And
not only the cost, which is what Mary Lou said, but you put the other human beings at risk in an attempt to rescue you.
The Coast Guard rescues all sorts of people out at sea quite regularly,
But that's not like affirmatively, I think Mary Lou's point is here they have decided voluntarily to put themselves in a really risk-laden thing, as opposed to somebody just going out on a boat who gets rescued, where the risk is incredibly low. In the former situation, there is a selfishness aspect in both respects.
877-301-8970 is the number. We're talking about this possible unfolding tragedy here of a submersible going to look for the Titanic, which has now not been heard of since an hour and 45 minutes after they left the mothership, as it were. That was on Sunday. It is now Tuesday, and we're talking about whether you would risk anything at all like this. The number is 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
GBH members, you can explore the best PBS dramas, nature, science, music programs, and more with GBH Passport. GBH Passport is an on-demand library packed with thousands of episodes of your favorite PBS programs and award-winning films. Stream at home on your smart TV or on the go on your phone, tablet, or laptop. If you're already a member, register today or join us as a member and start streaming your favorite PBS shows at gbh.org/passport.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Watershed Informatics, providing scientists with bioinformatics solutions for multi-omics data analysis. To learn more or to schedule a demo of their platform, you can visit watershed.ai. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, offering professional, local, long-distance office and piano moving with 23 locations throughout New England and across the country. More information at gentlegiant.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Mark Dregan. We're live at the library. In exactly an hour and 5 minutes, the mayor will be here, joining us from 12:30 to 1:30 to take your questions and ours. We are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. If you just tune in, we're talking about what the world is talking about. I guess Titanic 2.0, the deep sea, deep-pocketed tourists who've gone missing on their underwater mission to see the Titanic shipwreck. What are your thoughts about extreme tourism, as it's called? If you've seen the pictures of the submarine, that caller was right. Would you ever get into this if money were no object to peek at a shipwreck? It is really claustrophobic. What about touching the edge of space? During the break there, I was looking at CNN. You may know this already. 3,280 feet is the depth after which there's no more light, even if it's daytime. So the next 10,000 feet is in darkness. A sperm whale can only go 10,000 feet underwater. Yet this 13,000 feet is what we're talking about. By the way, this David Pogue, we played your little sound before when he was interviewing the CEO of the company, who said that David Pogue from CBS News, that they essentially got parts from Camper's World with where they used the game controller to control a submersible. Here is sound from this report at the end of last year on Ocean Gate by the same reporter, David Pogue, reading what the release form says before you pay your money and get to go.
An experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign?
Yeah, I mean, don't be angry at him. He's making light of it. Obviously, he had no idea this thing was going to happen today, but I think those are legitimate concerns that would scare me into not doing it.
I would say a quick glance at the texters would say there's not a tremendous amount of empathy for very, very rich people who did something that seemed kind of foolish.
Well, you don't want to say,
and now they're stuck.
Yeah, but you don't, I mean, having...
They're not trying to, they're not hoping
we hope they get rescued, right.
Go to a watery grave. Bill from Bridgewater says he'd rather donate his body to Harvard, take the risk there, than get on that submersible.
That's a good one.
And that, of course, is because of the people that donated their bodies to Harvard. Some of them wound up with body
parts.
Cats,
creepy creatures.
Yeah. My favorite was the thing about the skull with the top of the skull cut off.
What, should put plants in there or something?
Dried pink flowers, kind of like a little headpiece for the skull.
Did you read the piece in the Globe today about how Harvard, not just the morgue, Harvard's reputation in general is suffering.
And they're not answering any questions.
Well, you know,
that's one of your chief
That
bugaboos,
is one of my,
Jim.
any major institution or government, when they don't answer a question, you're entitled to draw the absolute worst conclusion, in my opinion.
If I was a billionaire, I would not be diving to the Titanic in a vehicle made from Home Depot parts.
No, Camper's World. Arlene in Plymouth actually has a bit of a distant connection to all this. Hi, Arlene.
Hi. Yeah. My husband piloted a submersible from Woods Hole Oceanographic when they first discovered the Titanic. And he dove in a submersible called Alvin and then deployed a remotely operated vehicle called, I believe it was Jason. And he put a small styrofoam coffee cup on the outside of the vehicle. And when it came up into the, out of the ocean, this styrofoam cup was the size of a thimble.
Oh my God!
So
wow!
If they lose pressure, I'm not going to even go on.
Yeah, Arlene. Arlene,
yeah.
So was your husband a marine biologist when he was doing this? So I assume he was and did he? So he got to see the wreckage.
Oh yeah. He dove on it 2 or 3 times with Bob Ballard at Woods Hole Oceanographic. Yeah.
Now, how'd you feel about him going?
I wasn't scared at all because it was sponsored by the federal government. The research was absolutely top notch, and there were all kinds of experiments. But I mean, of course, there's a risk.
Of course.
But there was no risk. The only thing that this is a little off color, but they didn't have a toilet. They had what they called a here cup, and it was like, I need to pee, can I have the cup? And someone would say here.
Oh gosh.
Someone would say here. That's a great story, Arlene.
So Arlene, how long was he down there for?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, it probably wasn't more than a half hour.
Yeah. Because we saw
Keep going. Go ahead. No, go. I want to. Yeah. What were we gonna say?
After the Alvin went down, then they eventually had just the ROV that they deployed from the ship itself, and that was televised and etc. It was very interesting, and nobody at Woods Hole Oceanographic would condone disturbing that wreck because it's a graveyard.
Arlene,
It
that was a
is
fabulous call.
indeed
We're really glad you joined us. Thanks
a graveyard.
for
Arlene,
the info.
thank you for calling. Yeah, as I said before, what I learned this morning is that it is a disintegrating graveyard because of metal-eating bacteria.
But
And
how
you can
long are they
see-
talking? What does that mean? Is
They're
that
talking that
decades, centuries?
they didn't say how many decades, but in decades it's expected to vanish entirely. And you can see even the pictures now with big holes in the metal. One of our texters, Jim, says the riskiest thing you've ever done is going to Fenway Park and getting stuck in the seats.
That was scary. That was really scary. That was during a playoff game. You and I went together, and what did we used to use? What was that thing called 40?
WD-40.
WD-40 to
Crisco
spray me
oil,
out of
whatever,
the seat.
Get him out of the
Exactly.
chair. Jim is going to have to leave with the chair
By the
stuck
way,
to him.
one of our colleagues, who shall remain unnamed, said the reason Arlene said she wasn't scared is because she wasn't going down. Her husband was going down to the bottom of the ocean to see that. But she was totally, that was a really nice story
Well, I
she
mean,
told.
you think of it was whole oceanographic. You
Oh,
think
it's
of
the
the scientists
top of
there. You
the
think of the
course.
top of the line. This does sound a little bit. Well, I mean, this went down twice before. This is the third voyage, so they did have successful voyages before. I guess there was some device, some sound device that went off and did not work well in one of the previous voyages. But I think they did not expect this to happen.
So why are you, I know that I'm mostly scared of things like this big time. You don't seem to be a person who has much fear.
I do. I'm not as bad as you, Jim, but I mean,
Thank
it
you.
would be tough to be.
But do you generally?
I don't like to fly. Don't like being off the ground. I like to take the train. Love trains.
Remember the time you and I went bungee jumping from that bridge? Do you remember that?
Somehow I
You've
blanked that
forgotten
out, Jim.
You ever
blanked
see
that
those
out.
people, by the way, head first,
Yeah.
dive off a bridge, and their head comes like within 10 feet
Yeah.
of hitting whatever the thing is at the bottom of the bridge, the water, the land, the whatever it is?
Yeah. Well,
I won't be doing that.
No, you
either.
won't be doing
No,
that.
the MRI, the guy who nailed it was the guy who said, Tim or whatever his name was, he doesn't even like going on an MRI. I'm with him.
Tom from Waltham, thank you for calling.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
Excellent.
I just want to give you a little perspective on adventure.
Please.
Yes.
I've done lots of technical diving. I've done lots of mountaineering, ice climbing, free soloing, so on and so forth. I've been doing this for 50 years. I'm in my mid-60s.
Wow.
And I don't consider what these people do to actually be adventure. I feel like they're wasting money to buy an experience that kind of seems like adventure. I just don't understand what they're doing. I mean, you were just talking about bungee jumping. Bungee jumping is a stunt. It has nothing to do with adventure. And basically, people think of me as being an adventure guy. I'm just a guy who goes out and has fun.
Okay, let's stop right there. Explain to me as graphically as you can what the fun part of ice climbing is, Tom. Go ahead.
I think you should go, and you might really understand it. I've been ice climbing for 48 years.
You have?
Yeah. I wouldn't like that.
And that's not terrifying to you?
Yeah, of course it's terrifying.
That's part of the shtick?
But you got to be able to deal with it. Actually, when you're really confident in what you're doing, you're just doing it. And you're totally focused. It's a total Zen experience.
Okay. Well, Marjorie would like to go with you next weekend, and then she can tell me, and I'll decide if I'm going to join the two of you.
No.
Tom, thank you.
Well, how about these men and women that do the rock climbing? They go up the side of these very sheer. I mean, and some of them do it with no nets.
Some of them sleep overnight.
Right.
They stick those little things
Yeah.
in the rock, and they sleep in like a hammock on the side of the damn thing.
Different sorts of people. Absolutely different sorts of people. Let's go to Tom. Oh, we just were with Tom and Waltham. Where are we going now?
We're going to decide in a second.
We're going to go to Stan in Chelmsford. Hi, Stan.
Hey, Stan, what's your deal?
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. Love the show.
Thank you.
First and foremost, you do not mess with Mother Nature.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And, contrary to Marjorie's point, you can get in a lot of trouble in 12 feet of water. I've scuba dived for years. And the thought of going 12,000 feet down in a little teeny submarine that got its toilet from Campers World and a controller that my son uses to play Fortnite would give me a little bit of pause.
Good. I'm where you are. I'm exactly where you are.
Well, there's one guy from the company, Stan, that was supposed to go on this trip and change his mind. There's no indication he did that because he thought it was unsafe. But, I mean, that's like the person that decided not to go down the airplane that, crashed
9/11.
or something. Yeah,
or
9/11. The
people
that were supposed to go and they missed the plane in the morning.
Stan, thanks
or
for
something
goal.
like that. Yeah, there's different people. Lots of people are thrill seekers. Some people are thrill seekers, and some people aren't. Do you like to go on roller coasters? I don't like to go on roller coasters.
You ever been on a roller coaster?
I've been on a roller coaster. Yes, I have. I'm not anxious to go on another roller coaster. But one of my kids, a little girl, she's on the roller coaster. She loves the roller coaster. Loves those big slides at the water country places like that, where you go down like almost straight down. I'm standing on the bottom cringing, and she's up there. She loves it.
Let's re-examine. I asked you at the beginning of the segment, what's the most risk-laden thing?
Mm-hmm.
In all seriousness, the guy nailed it. The scariest thing I've ever done was not the miniature golf thing on reflection. It was an MRI. Have you ever been inside an MRI?
No, but I have been in one of those sensory deprivation tanks. I used to have one of them.
I have too. I did it in New York.
I did a story on those, and you lie down, they close the cover, and
totally
you're floating
dark.
in the dark, and you can hear your
Because
pound.
it's salt, right? There's salt in the water.
Yes, and you can hear your heart beat,
that was
beat,
terrifying
beat, beat,
too.
beat. So that's like an MRI, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can, the deprivation tank you can just get out of anytime you want,
Well,
right?
I think if you screamed at the nurses, "Help me, save me," they would come
You have
and
a
rescue
button,
you, Jim.
actually, but you can't do that with this thing.
You can't
And by
do
the
that with
way,
this
there is no update on this, or we'd be giving it to you. We will during the show, and I'm sure if there's no update by 2 o'clock, NPR will be giving updates throughout the day. We have time for another one or two, Marjorie.
Let's go to David in Rhode Island. Hi, David.
Hey, David.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie.
Hi.
Some people are. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Some people are nervous and anxious about going to Fall River, but they have
come on.
A marine museum.
They do.
The Fall River Marine Museum has a really big Titanic exhibit. They
It does?
have.
Do you know about that, Marjorie?
I knew about it. Yes, I did.
Enormous scale model of Titanic for that 50s movie. Is it A Night to Remember or something?
Yep.
And they have Ballard's video, and I believe that they have the styrofoam cup that was crushed to the size of a pebble.
Well, that was Arlene's
They
thing
do?
about her. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think I saw that there.
So,
Yes.
David, you know a lot about the Titanic?
No, I'm a museum worker, and so
Oh.
I feel the same way. I think people should go to museums, and I think that they should not go around damaging artifacts.
Yeah.
Well, we agree with that, actually.
Yeah.
David, thank you.
Because
for the call.
that is a great museum down there.
You ever been there?
No.
I don't think so. How do you know
haven't-
it's a great museum?
Because I've heard great things. I've
Oh.
seen pictures of it, and anything that has anything to do with the Titanic. I mean, there's a big fascination with the Titanic, is there
Well,
not?
understandably,
And
no?
the James Cameron remake. I mean, he mentioned the original. David mentioned the original one. I think that was that Clifton Webb?
I don't
that
know.
Played in that one. That was a black and white one, I think.
I didn't even know there was an original.
Yes,
Called
there
what?
was. I don't know, maybe Titanic. I don't know what it was
know.
called. But the remake was done obviously with Kate Winslet and Leonardo
Yeah, I'm aware
DiCaprio,
of that.
and that was a big question that people couldn't get to the bottom of. And there was actually, as I said, scientific research into whether one person or two people could survive on the door in the fictionalized account.
Yeah.
And I think that the results were disputed, Jim.
Wow.
Some people said they could. Some people said they couldn't. And then if Kate had moved over to now Leonardo to get on the door, they both would have gone down together.
Before we take a break and move on here, there are two things that we should mention. We're getting a couple of texts. One, we're going to talk about the Hunter Biden situation, where he cut a deal with the Justice Department around tax and gun possession.
Yep.
Chuck Todd and Andrew Cabral on Thursday will get into both in some depth. And before we take a break, you should mention, there's Borowitz, our favorite satirist, has a headline: Fox News apologizes for, quote, regrettable flirtation with accuracy.
Oh, gosh.
In a statement, Rupert Murdoch criticized the Fox personality Bret Baier for, quote, disseminating information that was recklessly and unforgivably true. You said he did a hell of an interview with Donald Trump.
Bret Baier, if people haven't seen it, you can see the former president sinking his own ship. I mean, no pun intended there, saying that he didn't have a document. He had a bunch of newspaper clippings, insisting he won the election. And Bret Baier...
Was Baier correcting him?
Repeatedly, because, of course, Fox just had to pay almost
that's a good
$800 million
point. That's a very good point.
for allowing people to get on the air and lie about the election. So obviously they're not going to do that anymore. So he kept correcting them, and Trump would have none of it, and going on about how he could solve the whole problem with Russia and Ukraine in 24 hours. His hair was all over the place. It was a very bizarre interview, and it was on Fox, which is watched by people who support him. So,
do you see? Speaking of Trump, do you hear NPR this morning reporting on the latest poll on the Republican nomination?
Yeah, he's pulling ahead.
Trump has expanded his lead over DeSantis
well,
since
all I would say
the
is, Jim,
indictments.
is it's very early.
Yeah.
It's very early.
Well, Joe Biden's at 31% approval, Marjorie.
Well,
so Joe Biden
again,
hopes it's early.
I would say it's very early. Anyway, we are moving on.
We are.
Yes. Coming up next, a crew of veterans and anti-nuclear activists are touring New England on the Golden Rule, a much smaller ship than the Titanic. It is a two-mast sailboat. The ship is docked in Boston, and members of the crew are going to join us up next at the Boston Public Library to tell us what their efforts are all about. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Coming out of prison,
I left with the same mentality and eventually doing the same things.
But why?
The best way to reduce recidivism and make somebody successful on the outside is through education.
Yet only 15% of Massachusetts prisoners are enrolled in educational programs or vocational training, and half sit on wait lists. From the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting, I'm Chris Burrell. We start our new series, Life After Prison, today on GBH's All Things Considered.
Support for GBH comes from you and Tanglewood and the Boston Symphony Orchestra. A trip to Tanglewood this summer opens a world of possibilities. Official tickets are available at bso.org/Tanglewood. And M&M Skylights, offering a wide range of Velux skylight products, installation, and maintenance services to customers from Boston to Portland and surrounding areas. More information at mmskylights.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library. The mayor will join us in exactly 50 minutes. She'll be here live for Ask the Mayor, 12:30 to 1:30. We're streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. We just got a text. If you come to the library, can you ask the mayor a question directly from the library? The answer is yes. In 1958, a crew of anti-nuclear weapons activists set sail aboard the Golden Rule to put themselves between the U.S. government and its nuclear weapons testing in the Marshall Islands. Today, beautifully restored after years of abandonment, the original Golden Rule sails again as a project of Veterans for Peace. It's docked in Boston now, sailing around the country to raise awareness for nuclear disarmament. We're joined by its captain, Jerry Condon, and Golden Rule project manager, Helen Jacquard. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming in. So we'll start with you, Helen. Tell us what the Golden Rule is all about.
So the Golden Rule, now that it's been restored and is sailing for a nuclear-free world and a peaceful, sustainable future, has been up and down the West Coast for 5 years, and we were headed to the Marshall Islands, where we were stopped. The Golden Rule was stopped from going there in 1958 by the U.S. government, and the crew was imprisoned for 60 days, and the boat was sold, and now has been restored by Veterans for Peace, and we've been up and down the West Coast. We were headed back to the Marshall Islands. We made it to Honolulu, and we'd sailed around the Hawaiian Islands for 2 years, and then we were headed on to the Marshall Islands and Japan when COVID struck.
Oh.
And we had to bring the boat back to the West Coast. So in keeping with the vision of the people who have spent 5 years rebuilding the Golden Rule, which was to sail all of the navigable waters of the United States to educate people about the dangers of radiation, we decided to bring the Golden Rule on what boaters do. It's called the Great Loop all around the eastern states. And our Great Loop started in an unusual place, Minneapolis.
That is unusual.
Yeah,
Big ocean out there in Minneapolis, yeah.
Yes, and you can't make a loop out of Minneapolis because you can't get there from the north. But we did sail down the center of the country and around the tip of Florida. We visited Cuba, and we're sailing up as far as Bath, Maine, and then back to New York City, where we'll go up the Hudson River, the Erie Canal, Oswego Canal, and through the Great Lakes and finish in Chicago. This is a trip that's lasting 13 months. And we'll be visiting over 100 cities and towns to talk about the dangers of nuclear weapons and what we can do to stop the possibility of nuclear war.
Can we, before we continue on the current, why you're in Boston, what you're doing at the State House later today, Captain Jerry Condon, can you talk a little bit about that history back in '58? And Bigelow, who is quite a character in your film.
Right.
Describe him to us and what happened back then.
Yes, well, I am president of the Golden Rule Committee, but not the captain of our boat.
Oh, my
so
apologies.
I should clarify that. But thank you for the question. We are carrying on the legacy of 4 Quaker peace activists led by a World War II Navy commander, retired, who in 1958 sailed this little boat from Los Angeles to Honolulu on their way to the Marshall Islands with the publicized intention of interfering with U.S. nuclear testing. During 1946 and 1958, the U.S. dropped 67 nuclear bombs, exploded 67 nuclear bombs in the Marshall Islands. And this was an attempt to bring worldwide attention to the problem with the radiation that was floating all over the globe at the time as a result of nuclear testing by the U.S., the U.K., and the USSR, and France.
You know, I learned from the short version of your film that Commander Bigelow, I think you said, quit his commission a month before he would have retired with full pay because of his principled opposition to this nuclear testing. That's accurate, correct?
Yes, so he was one of the first veterans for peace.
It's really.
And was he not at Pearl Harbor as well?
He was near Pearl Harbor when the bombs were exploded over Hiroshima.
You know, just a side thing. I mean, obviously the radiation is a huge problem, but I've always wondered what happens to sea life with these huge testing of these massive weapons at sea. I mean, there's got to be thousands and thousands of whales, dolphins, all sorts of fish, all sorts of sea life over the years, just killed.
I think it's more a problem of what happens in the atmosphere because of, as was explained last night, when you detonate a bomb in the atmosphere, that's the more critical area. So the radioactivity was blowing around the atmosphere and we were breathing it in.
Right.
And it gets into babies' teeth and bones.
But the Marshall Islands is really poisoned forever.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't grow their own food. They can't eat the fish there. And to add insult to injury, they now have rising seas that are disappearing, starting to disappear those islands. So we have many Marshallese communities now living in the United States.
You know, Jerry Condon, my understanding is there's this UN treaty on prohibition of nuclear weapons. That's the good news, and it passed with one dissenting vote. That's the good news, as I said. The bad news is, it seems to me, at least from quick reflection this morning, the countries that are rejecting it, not in the initial vote, but in terms of it operationally, are the countries that have nuclear weapons and the ones that don't. So, and we're in that category, are we not? The United States
Absolutely.
is essentially rejecting the treaty.
The United States actually organized a boycott of the whole negotiations at the United Nations. So there were a lot of abstentions. About 40 countries abstained. Nikki Haley had a press conference out in front of the UN saying, this is a terrible thing, we shouldn't even participate. So
she was then ambassador to the UN, not as a candidate for the presidency, right?
Yeah, so the U.S. and its closest allies did not participate in the negotiations. The only one NATO country that participated was the Netherlands, and that was the vote against. But 122 countries voted for, and now 68 countries have ratified this. It's gone into effect as of January of 2021, and now nuclear weapons are illegal, but only for the countries that actually sign on. As you point out, we have a big problem because the nuclear-armed nations, the 9 nuclear-armed nations, have not signed. And so there's a campaign ongoing nationally and internationally to get more and more countries to sign that. here in Massachusetts, there's some really great efforts going on. In fact, this afternoon there's a rally at the State House here at 1:30 p.m. at the Boston Commons. And that's going to be in support of the Back from the Brink initiative, which supports the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, but also calls for common sense, short-term measures to step back from the brink of nuclear war, such as no first use policy, separating weapons.
No first use, by the way, is something that Senator Markey in the United States Senate has been advocating for a long period of time. So is the goal that the legislature, the Massachusetts legislature, pass resolutions, including on this Back from the Brink thing? Is that what the goal is today?
Yeah, there is a goal for that. There's also there's three measures that are being promoted. Nuclear Weapons and Climate Commission, to set up a commission to study the impact of nuclear war and nuclear weapons in Massachusetts, and to look towards moving the defense industries more towards addressing climate change. And there's also a measure that would ask the state of Massachusetts to disinvest from all the companies that are making nuclear weapons. And then the Back from the Brink initiative also has a parallel bill in the Congress, the U.S. Congress, HRES 77, which is a very good, comprehensive bill that more and more congressmen are signing on to. So I think it's important for people to support these measures.
Helen Jacquard, I understand nuclear weapons are a primary concern. Are you also concerned about nuclear power, or is it just the weaponry?
Very much concerned about nuclear power. There's so many parallels between the two.
What are they?
Well, starting with uranium mining and milling and the processing as far as getting into the centrifuges, and then the waste after you've done whatever you're going to do with the enriched uranium. So that's the fuel rods and the waste from producing nuclear weapons.
We wish you were here a month or so ago. We had Oliver Stone, the award-winning film director here, has done a movie, Nuclear Now, was in our studio about a month ago. I surely don't want to speak for Stone, but I will attempt to. I think what he'd say to you is, even if every single thing you say is right, and he may not agree in terms of the waste issue, but let's assume he did, he would say the threat posed by climate change is so much greater that we've got to take those chances. What do you say to him and to those people who buy that?
Nuclear energy is not a solution to climate change. It's too little, too late. It's expensive. It takes a long time to build those plants and bring them online. We haven't had any new nuclear power plants in a long time. One just came online. But if we were to solve the climate crisis that way, we'd never get there. So instead, we should take that money and put it into renewables and help people to reduce the amount of energy that they're using.
We're talking about the Golden Rule and an effort to combat nuclear weapons with Jerry Condon and Helen Jacquard. Helen, you mentioned that you've been on this boat for 13 months. Are you guys all on this boat? Is there a crew of you that's going around the whole world essentially here on this boat?
Well, Jerry and I started on this project right before the relaunch into the Pacific, right after the rebuild, and we are the two people that have been with the boat everywhere she goes.
Okay. So are you retired, or how can you afford this?
I did retire, and then I came out of retirement to be the project manager for the Golden Rule.
Okay.
And so we've been doing this for over 8 years now.
Wow.
You know what's really inspirational, too, I have to say, not only the original story and what you all are doing, explain what the state of this ship was before this recovery. Where was it, and what did people do to bring it back into the shape it is today?
She was in very poor shape, but floating in Humboldt Bay, far northern California, and she was tied then to a dock, and a gale came along, bashed her into the dock, 2 big holes in her side, and she sank in place. The next day, she was drug up onto the sand of the boatyard where she ended up being repaired. So she would have been used for firewood, except for the friend of the boatyard owner. He called his friend Chuck DeWitt, and Chuck came over, and they started talking about the Golden Rule, and let's not use her for firewood. Chuck is a Vietnam veteran and a member of Veterans for Peace, and he said, well, let me make a few phone calls. And pretty soon, 2 chapters of Veterans for Peace came together and said, we're going to restore the Golden Rule. Leroy, can we use your boatyard for that? They thought it'd take a year, and it took 5 years.
But there must be something. The reason I asked you about that is there's an upside to this. It would seem to me. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. This is a beautiful sailboat to sail around. Like, I mean, you're going through the Cape Cod Canal. You're going to go up. There's a wonderful side of this too.
You're so right.
Yeah, tell
That's
us
the way
about
people.
that.
Well, it's a very positive way.
Yeah.
This beautiful boat with this amazing story. People really respond, and the ongoing effort to keep it traveling and sailing to all these places inspires people. It really does. It's a very positive, hopeful way to talk about an otherwise very difficult topic. And I should say that right now, it's important for people to realize how close we are to the brink of nuclear war. Many experts think we're closer now than we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 because of the war in Ukraine, where we have two nuclear superpowers escalating a war. So we really think it's important for people to understand the danger that we're facing right now and the importance of pressing our government to support a ceasefire and negotiations to end that war before it's too late.
But in light of the fact that Putin, it takes two to proverbially negotiate, as they say, Putin seems to have absolutely no interest in any limitation on his ability to stockpile and use and produce nuclear weapons, right, and North Korea. So how do you deal with that if the United States were to do what you wanted to do?
We're asking for both sides to de-escalate, and we're asking for all the 9 nuclear powers to get together and take this as a wake-up call. This is the time that they should see that nuclear weapons, the possession of nuclear weapons doesn't help anybody.
What kind of reception are you getting as you're doing this traveling, Helen Jacquard?
Oh, fantastic. Groups that have never worked together have come together. Groups that sometimes work together have increased their cohesiveness. And so,
does this cross the current insane political lines that we're...
It does.
It does.
Because nobody I've talked to really wants nuclear weapons to exist in this world. They need to know that there's hope that we can get rid of them. They need to understand that we've already gone from 80,000 down to 13,000 nuclear weapons in this world through the efforts of Gorbachev and Reagan. And they need to know that there are people out there that are working multilaterally, not just in this country, but in all of the nuclear-armed countries, to get these countries on board to negotiate an end to nuclear weapons, as they promised to do in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but they've made no progress on it, and we need to see that that continues to decrease and ultimately eliminate nuclear weapons.
We try to also to lift up the efforts that are already going on in various communities, and here in Boston and in Massachusetts there's a lot going on. We really want people to pay attention to what the efforts of Veterans for Peace. Massachusetts Peace Action is doing amazing work to support these anti-nuclear measures. The Back from the Brink campaign. These are all places that we encourage people to look towards if they want to be involved in adding their voice and their votes to reducing and eventually eliminating all nuclear weapons.
So is there we're almost out of time here, but is there like a website, a place that people can go to if they're interested in joining your efforts?
Yes. For future events, it would be best to go to our website, VFP, as in Veterans for Peace.
Okay.
VFPGoldenRule.org.
Okay.
And to see what we've been doing, we very often live stream on our Facebook page, Golden Rule Peace Boat. So we would encourage you to look both to the future and the past.
And that film is available, I assume, on the website.
On the website,
What kind of sailboat
yes.
do you call it? What kind of boat is that?
It's a ketch.
Ketch, okay. And it's got 3 sails, and one of them's got a beautiful peace insignia on the sail near the stern. That's
By the way,
beautiful.
there's one other Massachusetts connection that is a little bit older. Bernie Lown, Dr. Bernard Lown, on behalf of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Dr. Lown was based in Newton, a couple of miles from here, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985 with a Russian cardiologist. He was a cardiologist as well. So there's
and the nuclear freeze movement began here.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's a really strong history and legacy for anti-nuclear activism here in Massachusetts, and that's continuing. So I hope some people might be able to join us today at 1:30 at the
right
Common.
outside the
But
State
it's got
House.
a beautiful day for it. So
Good luck to both
this
of you.
afternoon.
Thanks so much for your time and your efforts. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Cape Cod Canal. That will be beautiful. We've been speaking with Jerry Condon, Helen.
In Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Rockland Trust Bank, Their team is dedicated to bringing the vision of your business to life, providing support and advice tailored to your specific goals. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Mothers of faith find the strength to choose love and channel their religious fervor into championing their LGBTQ+ children. Watch Independent Lens, Mama Bears, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio. We're live at the library with the Boston Foundation's Lee Pelt. We'll get Lee's perspective on the looming Supreme Court affirmative action in higher education ruling. Then from 12:30 to 1:30, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu joins us for Ask the Mayor. You can call her or text her at 877-301-8970 or just show up.
I'm Marjorie Egan. After Mayor Wu will open the lines. Summer is nearly upon us, and the tourists are out in full force. Good luck to anybody needing a public bathroom in the city of Boston. It's one of our longtime pet peeves on Boston Public Radio, the lack of reliable, clean public facilities. We'll open phone and text lines to get your thoughts on this very pressing issue and any secret solutions you have to this dilemma. It's all ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden's surviving son has struck a deal with the Justice Department. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports the agreement marks the end of a 5-year criminal investigation the U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware conducted into Hunter Biden's tax history and business dealings.
According to the plea deal, Hunter Biden will plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges. He's also agreed to plead guilty to a charge of possessing a weapon while addicted to a controlled substance. In the guns case, Biden will avoid prosecution if he follows the rules in a diversion program. The president's son has been the target of ongoing attacks from former President Donald Trump and his allies, who've accused him of wrongdoing in matters related to Ukraine and China. In a post on social media, Trump blasted the Justice Department's decision, accusing prosecutors of handing Hunter Biden a mere traffic ticket. A federal judge still has to sign off on the agreement. Windsor Johnston, NPR News.
The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is on his way to the United States for a state visit. Sushmita Pathak reports Modi's 3-day trip will include an address to a joint meeting of Congress.
Prime Minister Modi will address Congress on Thursday and hold bilateral talks with President Biden at the White House, followed by a state dinner. Modi will also lead International Yoga Day celebrations in New York on Wednesday. The Indian leader has been to the U.S. several times, but this is his first state visit, a special honor. It comes despite worries about human rights abuses in India under Modi and New Delhi's close ties to Russia. For NPR News, I'm Sushmita Pathak in Gurgaon, India.
The National Transportation Safety Board is holding hearings this week to examine February's freight train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Quinn Kleinfelter with member station WDET says the fiery derailment resulted in toxic chemicals being released into the air and water.
The board will examine how the railroad handles derailments and how effective its equipment is. Congress and several state legislatures are weighing new rules governing rail safety, including creating a database for first responders of what toxic material trains are carrying. Norfolk Southern's Vice President for Safety, John Fleps, says the company is on board with that.
We are in full support of ensuring that they're equipped with the knowledge and the intelligence to respond safely to any type of accident that occurs on or around the track.
Lawmakers in Michigan and Texas complained they were blindsided when the railroad initially brought contaminated waste from East Palestine to their states. For NPR News, I'm Quinn Kleinfelter in Detroit.
U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour. The Dow is down more than 300 points, or more than 0.75%. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. New England Patriots cornerback Jack Jones had a date with a judge in East Boston Municipal Court today. Jones was answering to charges of carrying 2 loaded guns in his carry-on luggage at Logan Airport. He pleaded not guilty. Bail was set at $30,000, which he had previously posted. He's back in court on August 18th. And there's a bit of a bar fight going on between the owners of the Dubliner Irish pub in Boston and the owners of the Dubliner pub in Washington, D.C. According to Universal Hub, it began when the D.C. Dubliner filed a trademark infringement against the Boston Dubliner, demanding it change its name. But the Boston Dubliner said not so fast, and they filed a countersuit. The D.C. Dubliner is the older of the two. The Boston one opened only last year in the space where the Kinsale used to be. In its countersuit, filed in U.S. District Court in Boston, the Boston Dubliner asked the owners of the D.C. Dubliner if they've looked around at how many other pubs use the Dubliner name. Apparently, there's a lot. Why not settle it over a pint of Guinness? Those looking to book a vacation rental on the Cape have plenty of options to choose from, with numbers down this summer. The occupancy rate for rentals is down 20% from last year. That's according to the Cape Cod and Islands Association of Realtors. Red Sox and Twins play Game 2 in Minnesota tonight. We are at 70 degrees in Boston. Mostly cloudy today, high in the low 70s. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, thanking the people who make public radio great every day, and also those who listen.
Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. The mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, is going to be with us in about a half hour. We are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, Marjorie, just one little update on the discussion we had with listeners at the top of the show about the submersible that's been missing that was attempting to view the Titanic. The U.S. Coast Guard said it will provide an update on the search at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So we will bring you whatever they have to say at 1 o'clock. First now, we're joined at the library by Lee Pelton. Lee is the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation, also a member of the GBH Board of Trustees, the third most influential person in Boston, according to Boston Magazine. No, we didn't make the list at all.
We did not make the list,
He's also the former president
There
of
were hundreds
Emerson.
of people on the list.
And the former president of Emerson College. Good to see you, Lee. How are you?
Good to see you.
Thank you
Although
very
if it was been 155, I'm sure both of you would.
That's right.
I'm sure not.
That's what
but
I
thank
heard.
you very much.
I heard we were
appreciate it.
like 250th, and they only went to 249 or something
Right,
like that.
Exactly.
But anyway, Lee Pelton, you're doing a rebranding at the Boston Foundation. Tell us about it.
We are. It's very, very exciting. Under the leadership of Keith Mahoney, our vice president for communications and public affairs, and his team have been working on this for probably about a year and a half. And you know, when you go to the website now, it will have an entirely different look and feel. It will have that standard that I most appreciate. It's going to look really cool. And so it's going to be
That's right. You're the 7th coolest person in Boston. Did you know that? I bet you didn't know that.
It's going to be a cool brand. But, you know, and the colors will be different. The logo will be different.
But there's a point to this. It's not just a design thing,
It's
right?
not just a design thing. I'll tell you what the point is. So it coincides with really a transformation of TBF and how we do our work. We're moving away from 5, 6, or 7, how many you count them, impact areas, to a more, what I would call a more ecological ecosystem kind of engagement. So it's, you know, it's very serviceable for foundations to have, you know, 4 impact areas, arts or climate or something like that. And each year they go along and they pour a little bit of programs into these silos and then a little money on top of that. And so we've moved away from that approach to create these equity-centered ecosystems, and I'll describe them to you. The first one is nurturing strong beginnings, looking at the ecosystem of childhood, from prenatal to 6 years old and so on, and all of the social determinants that create a good, healthy beginning for children. So looking at prenatal care and postnatal care, early child education, child care, all of those things. And so we will use our resources, both in terms of policy and advocacy, in terms of programs and program intervention, and our research and our convening function to support organizations from that perspective to move this forward. The others are, the second is called building community wealth, and the third is I'm drawing a blank here, but has to do with amplifying community leadership, and the fourth is advancing community wealth. And I'm sorry, the second one is called, it's around business opportunity.
And the reason for this is, at least it seems to me from arm's length, is because the natural divisions between subject matter areas where you were giving grants don't work anymore. There's a lot of overlap, and so this reorganization more naturally addresses the problems rather than the old ways.
It's not that they don't work, but it's a different way of organizing the work that we do, both in terms of programming and in terms of grant making. And you can see all four of these ecosystems are community-based. They're not impact-based. And so what we're seeking to do is to lift up communities in these various ways with, young people, with creating business opportunities and wealth and nurturing and amplifying community leadership. So I'll give you this. People have heard me describe an ecosystem in this particular way. You remember that game, Jenga? You know that game,
Yes,
Jenga?
I love that.
You love
pull
that
little
game?
pieces out in the bottom,
Exactly.
top.
So that's a really good expression of what a community is. You pull one of the blocks out, and it creates stress.
That's right.
You pull another block out, it creates more stress. You pull out too many blocks, and it creates trauma. And that's where many of our communities are these days. And so we want to relieve the stress and eliminate the trauma through our programming and our philanthropy.
The second thing is called building economic opportunity, is what it says in your literature, that second.
Yes,
And give us the why. Why did you think this was important?
Because, why the change?
Yes.
Because that's the way the world works.
Yeah.
Right.
And differently than it used to.
Yeah, it's not, the world is not siloed.
Yep.
And we all live in communities, and we're all part of an ecosystem, whether we recognize it or not. And so this is a way to be fully engaged in the communities. So as you see, all of these relate to communities of some
And by the way, this may be, I know nothing about branding and rebranding, but for example, your colleague who I used to work with, Ted McEnroe, was kind enough to give us a hat with the new logo, TBF.
That's right.
And the coffee mug thing. It's because right away, and with the website, which I think goes live on Thursday, I think I was told, it hits you in the face that there's a new, that TBF is a new animal, essentially. Is that not?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we could describe all of this, excuse me, and you could read, a lot about it, but when you go to the website, the look and feel, using video and images rather than a lot of text will reaffirm all of this. And the logo, as you can see, it's highly energized, it's directional. And as we like to say, you'll hear us say this, if we can move equity, we can move Boston.
You know,
okay, we're looking forward to it. By the way, the first thing, you want to say more thing about that?
No, go ahead.
Under this building economic opportunity, the second paragraph begins, to build equitable pathways to success, the Boylston Foundation is focused on strengthening the education and career continuum. While you're focused on strengthening it, the Supreme Court is focused on weakening it because it appears sometime in the next, 10 days, there will be a likely repeal of affirmative action in higher education, not being the element for decision making, but even an element for decision making. We talked to the governor the other day. She was here a couple of days, Friday, I guess. She talked about this advisory council for the advancement of representation in education leaders, students, civil rights, trying to figure out what do we do within the confines of whatever the Supreme Court comes up with, which is probably not going to be good. What can the Boylston Foundation do to ensure that diversity in higher ed doesn't die with the Supreme Court decision?
Well, I do believe that we will still be able to, using our, our convening power, our advocacy power, our policy power, to push against some of the really disastrous outcomes of what the rulings are likely to be. We don't know what they will be, but I think logically they fall into three possible categories. One would be, and this would be the extreme one, I think, would be to prohibit any and all efforts to create diversity and affirm diversity on your campus. And they went after a private institution that receives governmental contracts, and they went after a public institution.
Harvard in North Carolina.
Yeah, in North Carolina. So they're using different kinds of rulings against both. The more narrow approach would be to say, you can still do this, but you can't use race as a plus factor in your admissions, even though you can include legacies as a plus factor. You can include the football player that can throw the quarterback that can throw the ball down the field 50 yards, the basketball player that can, shoot the jump shot beyond the three-point line, musicians who you have on campus, and others who receive plus, as well as young people who come from families with great wealth and show philanthropic promise for those universities. All of those things you can use, but you can't use race as a plus factor.
Well, I would assume the worst, and by the way, I'm guessing, and I've been wrong quite often when it comes to the Supreme Court, but I don't think I'll be wrong on this. My guess is the guy who will write the decision is the guy who admits that he got in a Holy Cross because of affirmative action. That'd be a de facto Chief Justice Clarence Thomas. The thing, I don't mean to be a cynic, but if I may for a second, I heard the governor the other day, I heard you. I haven't heard one credible, encouraging fix, even a partial fix, to get around what I think is the likely extreme Supreme. If they say race may not be a factor, you were president of Emerson not too long ago. So the Supreme Court decision comes down, let's say next week, you're president of Emerson, you convene a bunch of people as the president of a university that cares a lot about diversity. I know, my kid went there and she celebrated it there. Two, what's to do when your hands are so tied by Supreme Court?
Very, very little, actually. The third ruling might be something like you can still have race-neutral diversity policies, but you can't create, because we talked about this before, you can't create proxies for those. And so the nuclear decision would be the one that I just mentioned, and would have, and I'm not sure what we could do.
When you say proxies for those, what do you mean?
Well, suppose you have a student who wrote an essay and talked about his experiences as a young black gay person.
Yeah.
Growing up, and the experiences that he had.
Yeah.
And that becomes a proxy for race and for
But couldn't that just be a knockout essay that you were really impressed by?
It could be, but that, we'll see how the Supreme Court rules that, but that's a possibility. Because they are fearful that, there will be these proxies.
By the way, this is another precedent. It's not as old a precedent as Roe v. Wade was, 50 years. It's roughly, 20 years since the decision in the Bollinger, is that how you pronounce it? I think that's how you pronounce it. Lee Bollinger. Decision where they determined that race can be a factor, but not the sole factor in admission in higher ed. And by the way, you know this much better than I, but all the research that I've seen, all the credible research suggests it's going to have exactly the effect that people fear. Right. There'll be far less diversity, and particularly the most selective colleges in this country, which I think is a disaster.
Right, and the history of this actually goes back much further. It goes in terms of diversity being a plus factor. It goes back to 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education. And then in 1979, about 25 years later, the Bakke case in the University of California, which Justice Powell upheld that and said, I forget that diversity is a compelling interest, and so on and so forth. And then in 2003, another 25 years with the two Michigan cases, Grants and Grutter, one at the law school, one at the undergraduate college. And Sandra Day O'Connor wrote the majority opinion in that. And what she said was, I'm going to ratify Justice Powell in 1979, but it's my hope that we won't have to do this in 25 years.
Yeah.
And we're just 3 years ahead of that.
Well, that was overly optimistic.
Well, it was the exact same reasoning Chief Justice Roberts used in the Shelby decision around voting rights.
We were talking about the voting rights decision the Supreme Court recently down in Alabama, and a lot of us were surprised. I was surprised because they had been crushing voting rights, and Roberts wrote the majority opinion, and I was told by Andrew Cabral I was being incredibly naive when I thought that maybe Roberts had seen the error of his ways, because the moment that decision came down in Shelby, then all of a sudden all these legislatures started making it harder and harder for African Americans to vote. But her theory was that so when everybody starts calling you a racist after the affirmative action decision on the colleges comes down, you say, well, hey, I just fixed things in Alabama. Right. And what do you think of that theory?
I don't know. It could be true. I don't. The other thing to understand is that this ruling, if it's you can't use any diversity as a factor of anything, will have ramifications outside of colleges and universities. You know? Think about all the corporations, and you have DEI programs. What's going to happen to those programs?
I don't know. I don't know.
We'll see. And there's a group of foundations leaders that we met last week, and we talked this through. The issue was whether or not a grant is a contract, and if it's a contract, then it becomes vulnerable to the court's ruling.
So, Lee Pelton, we've discussed a lot with you the wealth gap, and I think people know that have heard you here that you're engaged in a multi-year effort with the Federal Reserve and some others, which put out the report that's been cited 18 trillion times from 2015, $248,000 the average wealth of a white family in Boston, 8 the average wealth of a black family, 0 the average wealth of a Dominican family, on and on like that. One of the elements is that where there is that wealth gap is around ownership of housing. And I read a piece that said the wealth of people on average around this country who own a house is 75 times that who rent. But some people don't have the option. And obviously, we know how high rents are getting. We discussed it a couple of days ago here. You at the Boston Foundation are engaged in, I think, a much-needed effort about a program that exists for people, rental assistance, but that many people who are eligible either don't know about or don't know how to access. What are you trying to do to help people in that quest?
Well, we're through our both our convening efforts and our policy and advocacy efforts are trying to help policymakers understand that the system for subsidized housing, rental housing, really needs to be fixed. And because it's very difficult to navigate your way through that process, each time you apply for subsidized housing at this place or that place, you have to fill out a 20-page
ridiculous
application.
Often with landlords' involvement, by the way, which complicates the whole thing too. So what are you doing exactly?
So we're working with some of the housing leaders, policy folks, and those who influence those efforts to sort of rationalize this system. It turns out that there are actually, and this is disturbing, there are actually more rental housing available than there is demand. And the reason for that, subsidized housing, the reason for that is because the folks who need it just have a hard time accessing what they want and what's out there.
One thing that I thought was kind of hopeful, and I didn't realize it had been that long, but you've, doing stories over the years on a lot of public housing, you're pretty upset by what you see when you get there. But now we are starting to invest in public housing again, which is obviously a great thing.
Yes. Well, I mean, the issue for Massachusetts, and I'm sure you'll hear this both from, you'll hear that from Mayor Wu, and I know you've heard this from the governor, is that we need to produce more homes
housing
and more rental housing, because the demand far outstrips the supply, and that sends up the cost. Over half of the residents in Massachusetts, more than half, are paying 30% or more of their income on rental housing, those who are living in rental housing. And that 30% threshold is what we call sort of housing burden. And that issue relates to the home ownership issue, because if you're in a rental place and you're spending, half of your income on just to live, your opportunity to save money in order to afford a down payment for a home significantly decreases. So they're certainly linked.
Are you? By the way, does the Boston Foundation have a position on rent control? I should know this, and I don't. Do you?
I have a position.
Well,
do tell.
I assume you're supportive in that. Does that mean?
I support the rent stabilization proposal that the mayor has.
But the foundation itself has no position.
Well, I don't think we have taken a position.
One of my obsessions, and I didn't get very far with the governor the other day, but I'm going to try again with the mayor this afternoon, is we have a system here which since 1994 has essentially allowed people who aren't subject to rent control and won't be subject to rent control to decide to defeat rent control. In 1994, I've said this a million times, it bears repeating, the 3 communities that had rent control voted to keep it. The 348, this is on the ballot, that didn't have it voted not to, as a result banned statewide. 2020, I think the vote was 132 to 23. It is in all likelihood going to get defeated in this session because a property owner in Fitchburg decides that the people of Boston, whose leaders, the mayor, 11 of 13 city councilors, and 75% of the residents, want this form of rent stabilization.
And don't forget the pretty impressive number or depressing number, depending on your outlook, of legislators that are property owners. Some of them big time property owners up in Beacon Hill.
But the reason I bring this up is not just to get your personal opinion, and I know you're always looking for advice from me about what the Boston Foundation should do. It's sort of like whether we were talking about the attack on LGBTQ people at Burlington Middle School the other day, and Bill Rick at Town Council. Democracy's hanging by a thread in this state too. It's not just when people who have nothing to do with it except personal profit in the legislature can defeat the democratic desire of people in an individual community, there's a problem, is there not?
I am as upset with you about the home rule petition. I mean, that's
you are?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't, and I know you spoke to the governor about this.
Respectfully, she had no interest. She said, I hadn't thought about it. I'm not interested in it. And
sort of surprised me, actually. But
yeah.
But yeah, I don't. The logic of that, it's illogical. Actually, it's really illogical.
Well, you know, we've said this before about rent control. I lived in Brookline before, when there was still rent control, and it was like a hurricane came in, and all those people along Beacon Street that lived in rent control apartments, a lot of them single moms with kids, the whole complexion of our kids' schools changed.
My street, Inman Street in Cambridge,
yeah, it was
totally different.
It was totally different, and it was in a very, very bad way. So, and I think it's really kind of upsetting. We had the story today that it wasn't from today, from a few days ago, but you know, Charlie Baker did this thing where if you're going to you get the T in your town, you're going to have affordable housing around that area. Well, 70.
Well, you don't have to. You have to zone.
They have to zone
for a denser zoning in this circumference around a T stop.
And 70 communities have said that they're not going to do it. Although the Attorney General has told us, Andrea Campbell, that they're going to have to do it, and I hope they will have to do it. But that's a big problem too, and the amount of time it's going to take us to get that built.
It is. I don't use the word zoning anymore.
You don't?
What do you use?
I use land use. Because that's what it is. Because that's what it is. And land use in this country from the very beginning has been about the distribution of wealth.
Yeah.
And it still is. And we know it, you know, both in New England and in the Southwest. The distribution of land is about wealth. And so zoning for me doesn't really capture the concept.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about this MBTA communities law, that's about land use.
Right.
And it's a way of preserving the character of a particular suburb, which is it's a proxy for maintaining the wealth in that suburb. That's what it's about.
So before you go, when do you want to meet me at the State House to lobby against the home rule stuff?
Whenever you're ready, man. I'll be right. I'll be right behind you.
I'm so glad you feel the way you do, because there's certain things I become
liquor
obsessed
licenses.
with. Well, it's a variation on the same thing.
all these things.
Which also is
That's
denied,
a whole
particularly to lower income people who are lucky enough to own a restaurant, particularly people of color. In any case, congratulations on the rebranding. We'll wear our hats and our drink from our mugs proudly. Lee Pelton, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'm glad the initials haven't changed, because otherwise my mug would be outdated right now, but it's not going to be outdated. So thank you very much for being with us, Lee Pelton. Lee Pelton is the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation. He visits with us quite often. We're very appreciative of his time. Coming up in just a few minutes, I think she's going to be a couple of minutes late, the mayor, but she'll be here soon. The mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, joins us for her hour of Ask the Mayor. You can reach her, ask her a question, or call her, or text her, 877. What's the number, Jim?
I'm not telling you.
Okay,
877-301-8970.
877-301-8970. Or you can also come here down to the Boston Public Library and speak with her on the homie mic. The mayor of the city of Boston is our next guest. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Only 15% of Massachusetts prisoners are enrolled in educational programs, and half sit on wait lists.
You get back out here and you're stuck not knowing anything, the same as you went in.
And the Department of Correction is turning down grants that could help increase class sizes.
We would try to have conversations around what's really happening here, and people didn't like being questioned.
From the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting, I'm Chris Burrell. We start our new series, Life After Prison, today on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office, helping small and diverse businesses grow by providing SDO certification and tools, including the Supplier Diversity Hub. Learn more at mass.gov/SDO. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Election workers across 22 states tell NPR they have received threats or felt unsafe doing their jobs.
They said that they were coming for my family, and somebody would have to pay for this.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. As the country braces for 2024, worries about what the next election cycle may bring. More on that story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Mayor Michelle Wu. She's with us for the hour, taking our questions and yours. Mayor Wu, it's good to see you. Welcome.
Nice to be back.
Hey
Hello.
there.
Yeah, thank you very much for being with us.
Can I just give out the number, Marjorie, if I may?
Yes, you may.
877-301-8970. You can text her or call her with a question, or you can go to our colleague Shay. Shay, do you want to raise your hand for a second? If you go to Shay, if you're at the library and want to, you don't have to applaud for her. She's just sitting there. But it's nice. If you have a question for the mayor and you'd like to ask it face-to-face, run it by Shay, and she will do the vetting. I'm sorry. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So it's getting warm outside. We haven't had a great June, but it's getting warmer. The sun is out finally. We have some open streets that you can tell us about. Newbury Street, Jamaica Plain. What's going on with open streets? Tell us.
This is meant to be the summer of fun in the city of Boston. We have had several summers now between the pandemic and just concerns about whether we can be together in person and how to do that safely, where now the goal is to really help heal. People are craving chances to be together with their neighbors and friends, and so we've expanded the number of open streets events that are held on a weekend day from usually 10 to 3 or 4, a 6-hour period, and it's gone from 3 that we tested out last year to 5 this year. The street is shut down to vehicular traffic, so kids can run down, parents don't have to worry. You can ride a bike, you can scooter, you can just stroll, and a lot of the small businesses will kind of spill out into the street with tables and or performances. It's a really great time, and the first one is this weekend in Jamaica Plain on Center Street.
Center Street, Jamaica Plain. Then we're going to have Newbury Street, right?
Newbury Street is actually separate from that, but yes, Newbury Street is every single weekend this summer.
Okay.
Every single Sunday this summer.
July 2nd.
Starting July 2nd. Thank you. And it's more than double the number of weekends that it has run in previous years.
Great. I think it's fabulous. More than that. And there are 4 other communities after JP, which will also have a street closure on a Sunday each month.
Roxbury.
That's great.
Alston Brighton, East Boston, and Dorchester.
You know, Mayor Wu, we were talking to Marcela Garcia the other day, who wrote a piece about you being in an unmarked police cruiser. There was reporting on this that with a siren and lights, and ended up hitting Yosemarie, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing her name, Pena. There was damage to her car. You were incredible. You got in the ambulance with her and rode to the emergency room to make sure that she and her baby were okay.
Speaking Spanish.
The mayor speaking Spanish,
Yes.
I should say, the whole time, according to Marcela. The troubling, well, there are 2 parts of the story. One, it'd be great if you can clarify for us, because I don't know if Marjorie does. What are the criteria for when you're riding around and sirens and lights should be on. But frankly, much more importantly, Marcella also told us, we called her after she wrote the piece and said her understanding is the city was in discussions with Ms. Pena. We know she's got a $1,000 deductible, $8,000 in damage, which I assume means that her insurance premiums are going to be going up. Both those things. What's going on between the city and Ms. Pena? And two, what are the standards, the criteria in effect for you riding around?
Yeah, Ms. Pena is an incredible lady, is a mom with kids in our school system, and I actually, in the course of our unfortunate meeting this way, but in the course of our conversation, got a lot of good feedback from her also about schools and everything else happening in the city. She's very involved, and
That's great.
You know, we want to make sure that she and everyone in her communities and networks can stay plugged in. I'm just really, really thankful that everyone walked away from that situation relatively, physically safe, and obviously shaken up. And in the middle of that, it was actually, I've done ride-alongs before with EMS, with Boston Police, but for the first time, be in the middle of a response to a real situation and to watch how everything is coordinated and everyone has their own rules, that was actually quite amazing to see the professionalism and care with which everyone on our first responder team is trained. I'm just very, very sorry that I had to meet Ms. Pena that way. We were taking a left turn in an intersection and got T-boned. One lane of traffic had stopped, and then she was in the second lane of traffic further back, and apparently did not see the sirens. This is an area where this particular incident is being investigated by the department, as is routine for any public vehicles that come into any sort of crash. We have video from multiple angles that appears to show that the police officer who was driving our vehicle came to a complete stop and followed the protocols as laid out for use of sirens. And again, it was just a situation with the multiple cars and multiple lanes not being visible. I'm someone who, where possible, I think it's really important for our elected officials to be experiencing exactly what everyone else in our community is experiencing through the school system, through public transportation, and it's a fairly standard practice for what are called dignitaries, right? The dignitary protection team to activate lights and sirens to move through traffic smoothly when getting to a destination. Everyone else is stuck in traffic, and that is something that is unusual and I think should and is used sparingly. But the reality of being mayor, and one of the unique parts of this job, is that I do have to get all around the city in all different locations. On my calendar today, I have 8 different meetings everywhere from way low down in Port Norfolk all the way up to Charlestown, Dorchester, Mission Hill, and City Hall. And sometimes it is when there's an important commitment to get to, those lights and sirens do go on. It is not frequently, but it is part of, I think, an aspect of this job that I have to get places, and we are reviewing when and how to make sure that is always safe and appropriate as well.
But are you suggesting, when you said people in positions of authority within whatever, the police department or whomever, have looked at this, are suggesting that your car and the driver of your car were not at fault, and that there's no responsibility on the part of the city? Is that the conclusion we're inching towards?
There's a set of protocols that govern when and govern how sirens and lights have to be deployed when they are deemed to be used, around how you stop, how you approach, how you communicate and activate the different mechanisms. And so that is under investigation, but there was one video that was leaked immediately that shows it from one particular angle. There are other angles that have been obtained that show other parts of how that happened.
But so there
those
may
are
be,
all
again,
included.
I was unclear, but there may be no compensation from the city to Ms. Pena if the preliminary investigation is to hold. Is that?
I'm not sure about what happens in terms of the individual compensation and deductible.
Just one thing that this is according to Marcela Garcia's piece in the Globe, actually, that Ms. Pena told that when she wanted to participate in the police report, she wasn't interviewed for the police report, which I thought was really odd. She was the driver of the other car, but that's what she said. And she felt as though it made her look like she was at fault for the crash. Maybe she was, I have no idea, but she thought the report was very convenient to her. And then she went down to the police station herself to report her side of the story, and the police didn't allow it. So it just seemed that there was not very gracious treatment of this woman when she went to the police department.
Yeah, my understanding is that she has been, it was very important, whenever I learned about that, to make sure that we could be in full communication. Again, through her eyes, I have now learned a lot more about what tends to happen in situations like this, no matter which two vehicles are involved, about the barriers that do exist, when for example, your car is towed, and then instead of just being able to go and retrieve it once you find out where it is, having to go to the police station and getting a release slip and this and that and the other, that is just insult to injury, literal injury, when you're in that, when that happens to you. And so there's a lot of lessons to be drawn from the situation, but I believe that she has been in contact with Boston Police, and we're looking at, in any experience that I have, I try to find the lessons that we can apply to the larger systems. Even in this particular intersection, since then, and since the news, I've heard from 3 separate people who got into car crashes exactly there in similar situations as well.
So it's your understanding that she has had a chance to give her version of events to the Boston Police Department?
That is my understanding,
Okay.
or at least that was going to happen. So I don't know if it officially happened yet, but that was something that needed to happen.
Okay, let's go to Donna in Charlestown. You're on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you. This is Kathy Kelly's friend, Jim.
Oh, Donna, it's so nice to talk to you. Kathy Kelly is the former president of the Boston Teachers Union, who is a very, very close, wonderful friend of mine. Donna, welcome. You're on with the mayor.
Oh, thank you. Hello, Mayor. I'm
Hello.
Donna O'Brien from Charlestown. How are you?
Nice to hear from you.
Thank you. My question is in regards to moving the O'Brien from the complex at Madison Park to the West Roxbury site. My perception is that there wasn't a lot of transparency in that move, or the decision to move. And I also, I'm wondering if you might be able to share the rationale. I must say, I was reading the Globe today. If a kid goes to the O'Brien from East Boston, they have to commute 10 miles a day. And I just think that as a former high school teacher, I think that is really doing a disservice to the children in the city.
Donna, thanks for the call. It's good to hear from you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you for your years of service to the neighborhood and to the city. Okay, so I think a couple things to share about just high schools in general. This has been a key focus area of ours because when you think about the school system, this is, between pre-K seats and early education and high schools, those are where we see the greatest disparities. Elementary schools, we're seeing more availability in the right places, great access, quality of education and instruction, and then the older grades you get, there's a perception and a feeling that you have to walk a very narrow tightrope, get into the right sort of small mix of schools, otherwise look for other options. Every single one of our high school seats has to be a high quality option. There's no other way that we will ever get to an equitable and fair and full opportunity for our students by tweaking this or that lottery process that applies to a small number of schools for a limited number of seats. They all have to have something to offer. They all have to be rigorous, supportive, and have wraparound opportunities. That means in a kind of macro kind of way, there had been a movement several decades ago towards smaller schools, moving to a K-8 model and a 9 through 12, and often taking our larger high schools, for example, in West Roxbury or in Hyde Park, and taking a larger high school and breaking that down into multiple small high schools in the same building, or even separating them out into other smaller buildings. We've now seen over demographic shifts and enrollment shifts, the district is moving to a K-6 and 7 through 12 model in general. It is structured around how our high schools have been growing for the ones that have seen enrollment stay steady or increase, and then other places where those shifts have been happening with population shifts. It's also, we want to guarantee that each one of our high school students has access to the full experience. You need to be able to have a whole range of AP classes and offerings. You need to be able to have multiple sports to choose from. And when they're very, very small school communities, you just can't sustain that kind of support or infrastructure because you don't have the scale to do so. The Madison Park and O'Brien conversation, first, I've heard this a couple times, there's been no transparency, things have been decided without hearing from students or parents, et cetera. This is a feeling, Boston we're so lucky that we are one of the most engaged cities anywhere in the country. If someone believes that they weren't the first to hear something, they believe that everything's been decided and all of a sudden they were left out. It's a tough juggle. And just to bring total transparency to how we got to where we are now, which is just the very, very beginnings of the process and decision making, there was significant vetting that had to be done about whether this was even a proposal we should consider. Structural analysis of the building, understanding from figures who have been involved in the history of the development of the district and individual school leaders and conversations here and there, but it was not we had not fully opened up the formal community process and conversation until bringing it to the public all at once through the press conference to be able to get it out to people all at the same time. We are just now a couple weeks into that now, and there are conversations scheduled for alumni, for students, for all the respective school communities and more, and multiple committees set up as well. The bottom line is this: we have two high schools who are battling for space. The Madison Park Vocational Technical High School and the O'Brien Math and Science Academy have been jammed into the same complex for multiple decades now. They share athletic space for the student teams. They have been battling over academic space. And again, each high school student deserves to have the full experience. The STEM programs and offerings haven't been able to be fully developed because of space constraints at the O'Brien. Madison Park doesn't have the full offerings that they could in terms of vocational tracks, and especially the ability to have adult education at night with the full space that it needs, to have residents partake in the services, whether it would be a veterinary track or culinary track, to actually have that interaction with community members that other Voc Tech schools have the space for. And so giving each school its own space is really important to tapping into the potential of all of our students and giving that offering. The O'Brien, the last thing I'll say about this exam school is that it is the only exam school where they are only able to admit about half as many 7th graders as 9th graders. So they have a whole lot more students join starting in 9th grade, but unlike the other exam schools who basically you come in 7th, you get acclimated to the culture, you form relationships, you participate in sports, you go all the way through 12th grade, they cannot admit 7th and 8th graders right now to fill those seats, and so they need the space to do that as well. We're really excited about the possibility, but still fairly early on in the community process to vet everything.
One of the other
transportation
concerns
is going to be a major factor.
Well, that
here.
actually addresses what other people are saying, which is you're going from primarily a community of color to primarily a white community, and transportation is not terrific. So are you not concerned about a dramatic loss of diversity?
Actually, so on this point, in conversations that we've had with groups of students, alumni, school community members, everyone says about the O'Brien, the strength, the beauty of this school community is how they embrace diversity, how it's reflective of our school populations, and how the commitment to really embracing and empowering all aspects of our students' identities, that is central to the identity of that school. And so that needs to be protected and preserved at a very minimum, and we would not do this if somehow that is at risk. The way that the exam school admissions process works now, there's a guarantee. In fact, the exam schools are the only schools where there's a guarantee for every socioeconomic background and geography to be represented in that school by the policies for admission. Every one of our high schools right now is already open citywide to students from every neighborhood. There are already students from East Boston going to school in Hyde Park. There are already students from Hyde Park commuting all the way to Charlestown High and stuck on the T. And so we would guarantee dedicated shuttles to West Roxbury that from East Boston to that location with a shuttle would be the same or even faster than what their students have to do on the T right now.
Deanna Pam had a great story in the Globe
Brilliant.
talking about high schools struggling, but there's one little aspect.
By the way, she's going to be with us next Thursday,
Yeah.
and hopefully the young woman who is incredible, Justice Porter, who's written about, will be joining her as well, the student.
But as long as you're talking about neighborhoods, and lots of people have talked about neighborhood schools for years in Boston, there's been pushback because the idea you're going to have, the more affluent neighborhoods have the better elementary schools than the less affluent neighborhoods. But I thought this was a fascinating thing, which I did not know until I read this story, that when Judge Arthur Garrity did the busing back in the 70s, East Boston High School was exempted because it was so far away, and or East Boston schools in general. And in this story, it talks about how East Boston High School is the only traditional high school in Boston with a wait list. You probably know all this, but our listeners don't. 1,300 students. The largest traditional high school offers all these courses that other schools like the Burke don't. 5 AP courses, 5 arts classes, 3 world languages, dozens of sports. The school is predominantly Latino, has more than 90% of its students come from low-income households. They're learning English or have disabilities, yet its attendance, graduation rates, and MCAS scores have risen consistently through the pandemic. The reason I mention all that is because that is one of the strongest arguments for neighborhood schools I've ever heard, because you do talk about kids being stuck in the T, the distances they have to travel. One of the, Brookline obviously is a much more affluent place than Boston. They're all neighborhood schools, so the parents know each other, the kids know each other, and this seems to, especially when these kids are mostly poor kids, seems to underscore that they're getting something from going to school a block away that the rest of Boston kids don't usually get.
There's a lot of good stuff happening at East Boston High School, and we were really excited to highlight that, in fact, this was one of the schools that had seen through and coming out of the pandemic, attendance going up, test scores going up at a time when education across the country was seeing a lot of challenge and, in fact, the opposite statistics. That feeling of community ownership and belonging, participation, and predictability for parents matters so much. It also translates into facilities. And I remember several years ago when I was on the council and going around and spending time with as many school leaders as would give me a tour and talk to me, East Boston High School stuck out because there were other schools where they didn't have shades on the windows. The buildings were so old that back then some schools had classrooms where it was tinfoil put up so the light wouldn't shine in students' eyes at the particular angle. And I remember visiting East Boston High School, and they had beautiful shades in the school colors of their sports teams. And they said it was through a really generous local alumni and community group that donated to do that. And we can't rely on, a lot of times the disparities in our district happen because the schools that are able to offer extra programming do it, or better facilities make those fixes because they tap into the surrounding neighborhood for donations and for fundraising. We have to have a baseline guarantee of services, facilities across every single school, and to be able to offer that predictability. We've had great success in other parts of the city as well with creating dedicated pipelines where if you go to this elementary school, you're going to be guaranteed a seat basically at this high school, and then parents or families who are just starting off even in kindergarten already feel an affiliation for that high school one day and getting involved in that community. So we have a lot of work to do, but the high school side is where I'm very excited for the progress we're making. We're basically hunting down partnerships and resources, putting in place a facilities plan. We'll have more news in the weeks to come about other ways that local anchor institutions, whether it's our universities, hospitals, or companies or nonprofits, are really making even bigger commitments to picking a high school and deeply investing.
Speaking of school, we have actually a related question from Maggie, who is at the mic at the Boston Public Library. You Maggie? Well, come on down, Maggie. You got to go to the mic and, yeah. Are you okay with that? You thought we were going to read the question? We're not. You're reading the question. Maggie, welcome. Thanks for coming. What's the question for the mayor?
Hi, Mayor Wu. Thank you so much. I was just wondering, so the school closest to us that we're hoping to get into doesn't offer K0, it offers K1. But this year, the school lost its credentialing for after-school care for 0, 1, 2, and 3, 4-year-olds. So it could only provide care for 5 and up. So the families we saw who were in K1 this year were told about this at the beginning of the school year and had to come up with a day-to-day schedule that changed where multiple parents had to take off days of the week in order to watch other neighbors' kids and do a very, I mean, I took a look at the Google Calendar they have going. It's pretty intense, which really made us question whether we would want to try to get into that school if we know that with 2 working parents, we would have to be a part of that situation. The Nathan Hale.
Okay.
And so I had heard, there's various rumors about, well, they might close it for this, they might do this, but the end of the situation was that there was no after-school care for the K1 kids.
So what's your question, Maggie, for the mayor?
Will you be making sure that all elementary schools can provide after-school care for K0 and K1 students?
This is yes, we're working on this, and this is such a source of, it's one of these mismatches where when we have a siloed approach, the people who end up falling through the cracks are our residents and our family members. I remember my older son got in off the wait list to their current elementary school, and so we started several weeks into the school year at that school. And then when we went and we were going to sign up for before and after school care because it was like it's a 9:15 start and 4:15 pickup, so you kind of need it on both ends of the day. Then we were told that all the slots were already taken, and so to not have the guarantee where everyone who's there, no matter what time of year you're arriving, no matter what age your child is, that is really important. Our Office of Early Childhood is working on this particular issue. I will check in on the Hale and see what the possibilities are for next school year.
Maggie, thanks for the question. Before we take a break, Mayor Wu, the other day Shirley Young was with us from the Boston Globe. She and we started a conversation 2 weeks ago about whether or not you can drive in bus-only lanes if you're not a bus.
No.
Well, 1 second. She was here, and before she came on Friday, Jackie Goddard, who's the spokesperson for the Department of Transportation, was here, and they have a discussion, and Shirley tells us, fortunately or unfortunately, I shouldn't judge it, there is no law against driving. We then asked the governor. The governor said, I believe you'll get a ticket if you're a car and drive in the bus-only lane, despite what we had just heard from Jackie Goddard. Now you're saying, what the governor's saying is that you can't drive in a bus-only lane? What is the law? Do you know what the law is?
I don't know the exact provision of statute, but it is up to the city generally to enforce use of, so for example, just as if you parked for 2 hours in a 15-minute takeout spot, it's really, technically, I guess it's up to whether someone sees you there and puts that ticket on your windshield to enforce it, but
they're authorized to enforce it if they
rules.
choose.
Yes.
Are there rules that say that you cannot drive in a bus-only lane?
I will double check, but I believe the city has the authority to ticket for that as well. Do we have the enforcement capacity is another question, but we have seen, this is what, we're having conversations about street safety all across the city in different ways, and there are particularly dangerous road configurations. For example, we were talking a little bit about Center Street in West Roxbury, where it's a neighborhood business district, lots of small businesses with people trying to cross the street frequently. We've had crashes everywhere, multiple fatalities, and that two lanes of traffic going both directions, where the outer lane might stop and see someone crossing in a crosswalk, but the inner lane can't see around that vehicle. Some folks have said, well, why not just put a bus-only lane there and then make it one lane of traffic. We have seen that in other parts of the city where it doesn't always function as well as it would if everyone followed those rules, which just makes it more difficult to reap the benefits of public transit riders going as fast as they should, and buses being able to do multiple routes, and street safety overall.
Could you, one of your staff people, let us know before you're back next month? Great. Terrific. We have to take a break.
Yes,
Marjorie.
we're talking to Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. We're going to keep talking to her for the next half hour or so. You're listening to 89.7 GBH Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
GBH brings you fact-based news and smart local conversations every day. In order to do that, we rely on a community of supporters just like you, our sustainers. Sustainers give monthly contributions that ensure a reliable source of funding. That then becomes the news and information you depend on. Funded by the people in our community to report on what happens in our community. Learn more and sign on as a GBH Sustainer today at gbh.org/sustainer.
Support for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. And The Huntington, presenting the Lehman Trilogy, a story of family, ambition, and risk. Winner of the 2022 Tony Award for Best Play. The New York Post calls it a must-see event, June 13th to July 16th. huntingtontheater.org. And Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Regal Music Theater, presenting Rodgers and Hammerstein's groundbreaking musical Oklahoma, a story full of cowboys, farmers, romance, and fearless optimism. June 23rd through July 2nd. Tickets at regalmusictheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan, live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just tuning in, we're joined by Mayor Wu for Ask the Mayor at 877-301-8970. Last month, Mayor Wu, you gave us a plant. I have not killed mine, and it's 30 days, which is a record.
It's good.
What are you bringing? What you bring kindly today for us? What's this?
Okay, so these are extra swag from our Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Advancement's Pride activities.
You can hold them up.
Here we go.
We're just coming in, rounding out Pride Month here, and
turn it around too.
This was the first year that Pride for the People the Pride Parade was back in multiple years, and there's been a lot of great work happening through this office, whether it is engaging young people or focusing on housing that is LGBTQ senior friendly, or supporting our neighborhood organizations doing great work.
Let's go to, thank you for that, very kind of you. Let's go to CJ in Hopkinton. Welcome to the show, CJ. Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thanks, Mayor. I think you're doing a formidable job, and I think you and Governor Healy are a force to be reckoned with. I just want to start with that. A bit of background, I had a business in Hopkinton. I had to close it post-COVID, and then I had a fire in my apartment and lost my home.
Oh.
So I went on to the CHAMP housing list and I applied, and I received notification in January of this year that I was successful in getting a place. In fact, I turned down offers in Watertown and Belmont for this development in East Boston. It's now June, mid-June, and I still have not got a move-in date. I'm living homeless. I've tried everything to get back on my feet. I'm even studying part-time. But at 53, I found it impossible to get a job in the industry I was in. I'm invisible, But back to the housing, I just want to know, why is it taking so long? Every time I phone or my advocate phones, having been told I've got it, I've seen the apartment, I'm still waiting. And no
just so I understand the situation, have you already filled, given all of the documentation and paperwork?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Everything.
and this is one of the. Is it a public unit with the city, or is it one of the deed restricted units that's available through
it's a
private?
development It's mixed development, public and private housing.
Okay.
CJ, don't go away
Got it.
while the mayor is answering, please.
Yeah, we'll, if you can stay on the line and we'll get your contact information to check into this particular building and what the situation is. We will definitely look into it. I'm so sorry that lag is there. This has been one of my focus areas this year, is really for the city to slow down, to go faster, that in fact we are doing so much. We're adding more affordable housing. We are increasing and boosting the number of units that are affordable and permanently affordable through programs like this. But if the processes aren't working to actually get the units filled and get people into their new homes, we need to really understand if it's a staffing issue, it's a process issue, if it's a legal issue. So your experience would be very helpful for us as we think about how to manage the lotteries for the affordable housing developments, and also how we get these units occupied much faster.
CJ, do not go away. Stay on hold, and our colleagues will get your contact information, which we'll share with Mayor Wu's office. And thank you very much for the call.
We have a gentleman at the Boston Public Library, Mike, who wants to talk about homeless children, I believe. Is it Charlie?
Hi, Charlie. Welcome. Thanks for coming. A little closer to the mic, Charlie, if you would.
Okay. Hello, Mrs. Mayor. And my question is, why hasn't the city solved the problem of homeless children?
Thank you for bringing it up. It's one of those, how could we as a society tolerate any kids not having the basic necessities? I think the short answer is because the numbers keep growing and because the housing crisis is pushing out so many families. We have actually been expanding a lot of the efforts locally, including vouchers for Boston, through city government for Boston families, working very closely with the school system so that when we identify our students and young people who are on the verge of potentially losing their homes, that we can help prevent that and plug them in right away. And then I will add also that, in fact, this year, our shelter system is more strained across the Commonwealth than it has, including in Boston, than it has been in quite some time, because especially with so many immigrant families coming in with the migrant crises, that many cities are looking to provide supports and resources for. We have had, for example, we'll hear from Boston Medical Center that on a particular weekend, it might be as many as 50 families who are waiting for healthcare services and shelter and to have some sort of relief, who are finding their way to our city. And so many of those families include young children. As soon as we can get them situated, we are able to get them plugged right into the school system and all that. But we hear that sometimes for families, it can take a year or plus to hear back from the federal government about whether they're entitled to a work permit and granted asylum status and all of the legal hoops to jump through. Once they have that documentation and those authorizations, they are well on their way and eager to, and are then filling key vacancies that benefit everyone in our society. But we see the need is very great and it's growing every day.
Charlie, thank you very much for raising the subject. We appreciate it.
You know, Mayor, well, we've talked a lot about some bad apples in the Boston Police Department, people that have been fired for stealing or for overtime they didn't work or for violent situations and so forth, and they've been reinstated over the years. This has gone on for many, many years. And we talked to you about, and arbitration is what has happened. They were fired by the police commissioner, and then the case went through arbitration, and then they were reinstated. And I know you have talked about before how you were hoping to avoid arbitration with the police contract and go to a civil service kind of deal. What I understand now is that you're in contract with both the firefighters, but mostly the police is what I was talking about, that you're heading toward arbitration, and the state is getting involved through the Massachusetts Joint Labor Management Committee, and it's going to go to arbitration. You've asked for things like having 911 calls diverted to alternative response teams instead of police officers, mental health kind of thing. So, number one, I don't understand why the state is involved, unless this is another home rule petition kind of thing where the state decides something that's unique to Boston or the contract that's unique to Boston. And number two, it seems like this is out of your hands, that this is just going to go to this arbitration board and they're going to decide what happens with this contract.
Yeah, the unique structure of our public safety unions in Massachusetts is that they are by law entitled to arbitration if there's a basically stalemate or stalling, if there's an impasse that has been reached in bargaining. We pushed very much to show that we believe there was still room for common ground and progress, but when one side really says that there's an impasse, you can't get out of impasse on one side alone, on the other side alone. So it does look like we are headed in that direction. We still intend to use arbitration and this mechanism differently than it has been used in the past, where we're not just going to bring proof or numbers or financials around what the salary should be and hope that they split it somewhere in the middle between the two sides and two positions, but really to bring forward the justification and the ask for some of the operational reforms that are tied into the legal language in the contract, for example, around arbitration for disciplinary measures or provisions around medical overtime or other aspects of health and wellness for the officers.
So the difference would be, you're saying it's just not going to be about money, it's going to be about the way the department runs.
Yes,
and
we believe that all of that should be on the table even as we go to arbitration.
And you think you might have more success there even though 2/3 of the time, or is it 3/4 of the time, one or the other? 3/4 of the time the city loses and the union wins.
Well, we have to try something different because what has been happening in the past has not been working. The reason, the way that it's set up, I hate to use this kind of confrontational language, each side, so basically the union and the city each select an arbitrator, and then the two sides agree on a third. So it will be a panel that is thinking about this, and we intend to make our case with a lot of documentation and also a focus on how this actually benefits officers to be able to have more accountability as well.
Can I ask two police-related questions? We ask you every month about one cop in particular, a police captain, who's nicknamed Pepper Jack Danilecki by protesters. I think that's fairly obvious. 4 years ago, he was accused of using excessive force. Investigators determined he had violated the department's use of force guidelines and lied. And to quote the Globe, for 2 years it's been in a bureaucratic abyss. We asked you last month if there was any update. You said no update. Is that the same situation
I
now?
do not have an update this month either.
Are you upset about this? 4 years ago this happened to this guy. He's had dozens of complaints against him, many of which have been around excessive force. He's never, no penalty has ever been around these excessive force things. And this is 4 years. And this is still just sitting there, I guess, waiting for the commissioner to do something. Does that concern you, the lack of speed and urgency?
There are, and you can walk into the commissioner's office and you'll see a stack of folders this high of different matters, including various items that come on his desk through different ways. And he's been doing a great job. Again, the bigger theme is not just try to be reactive and respond to what's in front of you, but change the system so that you can actually have more capacity and smoother process moving forward. So between the way he's been thinking about his administration and filling some of the key vacancies that have been missing there had not been an HR director for a very, very long time in the department, which was causing a lot of those to flow to the commissioner's office instead of through the civilian infrastructure. And so I know he's getting a lot of those pieces in place, and I have full faith in the internal affairs department that he is running and the decisions that are being made.
Do you ever say to him, I don't mean this it's going to sound odd, do you ever say to him, Commissioner, you really have to move it on this. We can't have these things sitting around for years despite how high the pile is? Do you do that kind of thing? Or
I like to really understand what the barriers are so we can help tackle them. I think having been in city government for some time, I know what happens when you say something has to move. You might be able to move that one little thing, maybe, while you're paying attention, but the real issue is what can we fix in the underlying system that will make it so that I don't have to track down every little thing, or it doesn't have to just only flow through when the media happens to learn about something.
Speaking of the cops, one of the reasons, my understanding is, why you vetoed the budget that was sent to you was because of a $30 million cut in the police
31.
budget. We learned this morning from David Leonard there's also a $1 million cut in the library budget, which he says would affect operations and their ability to provide services. What's the status of that? And by the way, is the library cut one you're concerned about too?
Yes, there were, just to back it up a little bit, we're in the second year of a new budget process where essentially the administration files a budget, the council files back their own budget, which can include amendments but must keep it balanced.
Yes.
And then it's back on the mayor to file basically a last and best offer back to the council, and then at the end of the day they take a vote to essentially choose between the last two versions that are on the table. We have now proposed our last and best offer back. They will have a meeting tomorrow to accept that into the record formally, and then next Wednesday, the last Wednesday before the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, is when the council hopefully would take action to make sure that budget happens. The amendment process this year resulted in, at first it was going to be $75 million of additional items that the councilors wanted to fund with corresponding cuts to allow for that. They ended up not passing it that first week and delaying it by a week, and then sent over $52.5 million in amendments. Again, they had to find the cuts somewhere because that's just how the budget works. And so when we ended up seeing councilors wanting to, for example, add more resources for rodent control, but then because of a large $10 million item somewhere else, they had to pull money from inspectional services to fund that. So the department ended up being underfunded, even though they wanted to increase resources for it. So it was a very large package of amendments, and to pay for something of that scale, it was inspectional services, public works, transportation, library, veterans, police that ended up getting cut significantly to provide room for that. So we have restored those cuts. We don't believe that we need to make progress on new initiatives and big ones, absolutely, but it can't come at the expense of maintaining basic city services and providing what our residents need most of all.
Are you concerned about the racial divide on the city council on this vote? My understanding is it's all the councilors of color and one white councilor in the 7 votes, and all white councilors in the 5. Is that right? And if I'm right, is that concerning?
When you look at the numbers around what our departments need to maintain the services at the level that they are at, to make sure that Boston continues to be one of the safest big cities in the country, a city that is actually investing more in childcare and basic infrastructure like schools and streets. To me, the numbers speak for themselves, and the budget that we have returned to the council does accept some portion of amendments. I think it's about $3 million that we were able to accept that cover many of the items that were a priority for the council, but we have to have something that balances and that also prioritizes our function of core city services.
I thought the extra $31 million that you didn't take out of the budget would help you with the cops, but you're in arbitration anyway, so maybe it didn't work. I don't know. Alan in Jamaica Plains, thank you for calling.
Welcome, Alan.
Hi. This is Alan in JP. Let's see. I was an early supporter of the mayor because she promised to empower us in the community and listen to us. And I'm calling about the Arborway Yard in Forest Hills. And I'd like to thank the mayor. She listened to us very closely on Friday at Mozart Park, and we appreciate that. And at that time, we said, here in Forest Hills, we're doing a lot of hard work of what makes cities work. We're taking the things that a lot of other places in the city don't want. We've got a major multimodal transit hub. We got thousands of units of workforce housing with lots of affordable coming. We've got hundreds of new substance use disorder beds coming, and we're welcoming the MBTA's $1 billion 200-bus Arborway garage and their MBTA HQ2.
Alan, what's the question?
And this
please?
area,
Alan.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. I'll be right there.
Sure.
Okay, it's a desert here of services that we need, and we've worked with the city on that site, and we have an MOU promise from the MBTA and the city that we're supposed to get no less than 8 acres for transit-oriented development. And we're just asking the mayor that she please honor the MOU, the Arborway Yard MOU, and we're going to be at the Boston English on the 22nd of June with the MBTA, and that's what the community is going to be saying. Please honor the MOU for the Arborway Yard.
Alan, thank you.
Thanks,
Ms. Mayor.
Alan. In fact, Alan had created or handed me a really clear and easy to understand flyer about the different parcels. The Arborway Yard, as he's describing, is state land, but the city, our Public Works Department, has a small chunk of it in the corner, and Alan was saying that if that could be made available for the state to actually relocate all the way to the edge, then the rest of it could be opened up in a way that made much more sense for affordable housing and open space. And so I handed it to the right people within the administration to take a look at it. We want to be as creative and responsive as possible in thinking about how the leverage that we have, the spaces that we are able to use or shift or change can actually further that bigger goal. So I will get back to you as soon as we hear back.
Can you give us an update? We've discussed with the governor the last couple of months here your rent stabilization proposal on Beacon Hill. 2 months ago, I said to her, it's essentially dead. Aren't you troubled by the fact that legislators who have nothing to do with Boston are going to kill a proposal that the mayor, the city council, and 3/4 of the people in Boston want?
Some of the huge landlords.
She said, exactly right, thank you, the Globe, for that reporting. She said, I don't accept that it's dead yet. We'll talk about it next month, which we did the other day. We'll get to that in a second. What's this? Have you spoken to leaders? Is there any hope for your proposal, your rather modest proposal, I think most people would say, of getting a majority of votes on Beacon Hill?
I haven't gotten a clear no, so that's,
Okay.
that's something. I mean, the legislature is in the middle of their budget process right now as well, and so most of the other big ticket items are going to have to wait one way or the other until after that is resolved. The piece that we do have that's in the middle of the budget process is the MBTA board seat, which was filed by the House through the budget officially, and so that is actively in conversation
Giving
and
Boston a
negotiation.
seat on the
Giving
board.
Boston a seat on the MBTA board to have
Which
direct
is
voice in
so
governance.
ridiculous that you even have to ask. I mean, the state running everything in Boston is just really going to
Yeah,
give
that's
me
what we want
a heart attack.
Can we talk about
My
that for a
head's going to
minute?
explode.
Oh, on that, you're in a tough position because I assume you have to be relatively nice to the legislators. But
You don't, Jim.
I asked the governor the other day about would she be interested in trying to help get rid of this home rule stuff, where again, a person in Fitchburg, landlord or not, gets to decide what's good for Boston. And she said, her response was, she says, it's just not something I'm focused on right now at all. I mean, it is the system that we have here, meaning home rule. Are you not frustrated by the fact that
No,
people,
she thinks it's great, obviously.
are you not frustrated by this home rule absurdity?
So I'll give you a couple examples of things that we already have that are in that process, or that we have been able to get through that process, thankfully, but with tremendous effort that could have gone elsewhere, to redevelop and open up Jazz Urbane, which will be one of the first large-scale sit-down restaurants in the bowling building in Nubian Square. It's going to be incredible. We had to go and beg the legislature and take multiple votes to get a liquor license for that spot, for that building. Every time there's a major public housing redevelopment, we have to get a home rule petition so that we can manage our own bidding process and not have to go through all of the various pieces, and to streamline it a little bit because it's meant to protect against a particular thing related to private development, overwhelming, but this is a public housing development, so there's no risk of that, but we still have to get all the votes, and we had multiple go through last session. So we do have home rules that are going through, but they're on really, in some ways, common sense things. And then right now we have rent stabilization, transfer fee, MBTA board seat, and this is, other cities around the country have more ability to sort of act on their own destiny. For better or worse, we are all intertwined here in Massachusetts. I think it comes out of the ethos of such active participation, and also the Brahmin Irish tensions back in the day that we are still under right now with the legislative structure. But I've had great success and better and better understanding of what the pressures are on the legislature as they're thinking about things statewide, and they've always been incredibly responsive to us under the current system.
Sorry, what pressure? I'm sorry to do this, so my apologies. What pressure is there on any legislator who doesn't represent Boston that Boston gets to decide, even if it was the worst plan ever? Why should any legislator decide what Boston does for the people?
And the liquor licenses is so unfair.
Okay, but
it's so unfair.
We're all going to go lobby. We're going to turn this into a legislature lobby.
We're going to have a big sign.
Okay.
Home rule. No
I'll give you
thumbs down.
Is there any reason? I understand that's what the Constitution says. Is there any rational reason?
No.
Not legislative or constitutional. Any rational reason why people outside of a community on Beacon Hill should decide what that community's leaders and its residents decide is best for them if it doesn't affect anything beyond their borders? Is there any reason?
So, okay, I'm really trying to pull myself out of my own views and to sort of take the, practice thinking from other people's perspectives. I would say probably the best argument is that we are, our kind of New England structure is also very, 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 what's the right word? The city municipal boundaries are much smaller and broken apart here than they would be in many, in other cities. Boston's boundaries would effectively encompass all of Cambridge, Brookline, Somerville, the larger metro area. And we, through the quirks of history, are where we are now. And so you can imagine when there's so many little municipalities all close to each other, okay, fine. Issues don't stop at the boundaries. Bike lanes don't stop at the boundaries. Housing prices don't stop at the boundaries and suddenly change. And so there is some benefit to coordination, and we are trying, and I think having great success at really proactively pushing for that regional coordination. That might be the best.
Okay, so that was not you. That was out of body.
It's the Brahmins going after the allegedly big drinking Irish.
Okay,
I'm Irish.
That is what the history is.
They were going to put out too many liquor licenses in every corner.
Last question, and then I'm going to drop it. Does the mayor of Boston, that would be you, by the way, does the mayor of Boston agree with what that person just said about the rationale for home rule?
We have one of the most restrictive home rule schemes anywhere in the country. And I won't be greedy and say that we need to have it all and remove every single one of those exemptions. But the irony is that the term home rule actually means that what only affects your city, you should be able to rule over. But how it's interpreted in Massachusetts is that our home rule authority, according to the Constitution, has 6 exceptions, 6 chunks that are taken out of that, including anything related to taxes and revenues, including anything related to private parties having a relationship like in a rental situation, right? So all of that gets pulled up, whereas other cities just have a much more broad home rule without those exceptions. And sure, where the state has issued a law, maybe the city can't override it, but where the state hasn't issued any law and it's just up for where the state hasn't acted, cities should be able to say what's best and make decisions that fit their residents' needs.
I feel much better now. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. It's great to have you. Can we hear it from Mayor Wu?
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you all.
We're sorry we couldn't get to all the texts and the phone calls, but we do appreciate everyone that tuned in. We've been talking with Boston Mayor Michelle Wu.
Will you join Lee Pelton and me when we're picketing State House next week? Are you free?
I think we need T-shirts.
She said she doesn't think she's free that day.
Not free that day. Okay. Coming up next.
Good to see you, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Oh, we forgot to ask the mayor about toilets in the city of Boston.
Oh, can you put that back on for 30 seconds?
For one second, we forgot to ask. We're going to ask people about this coming up next. People complain about there's no place to go to the John when you're downtown.
We heard this about the Donna Summer Festival, too.
Oh, is that true?
Donna Summer Festival, the Swan boats, and all that kind of stuff.
So how are we doing?
So do you think that there's any more room for bathrooms around here?
Yes, there's actually locations that have been picked out, whether it's on the Greenway or other places. We have the system down. They can be self-cleaning. We just need the infrastructure and funding to make it happen.
Fabulous.
I think that's something we can all get behind, raising money for more toilets in the city of Boston. Thank you very much, Mayor Wu, for being with us. We really Really appreciate it. See you later. We've been talking to Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. We very much appreciate her coming here. Listening to you, Jim, that's not easy, as we all know.
No, that answer was the perfect answer at the end. We're more restrictive than virtually
We're more restrictive.
And home rule means
no
what?
home rule.
Home rule is what it should
what it
mean.
means is no home rule. That's what it means.
Exactly.
That's the irony there, too. But anyway, enough about that. We're going to get back to what really counts around here. We don't have enough bathrooms, okay? We don't have enough bathrooms. It's summertime. The streets are going to be open. What do we do then when the streets are open? You're walking down them. 2 engineers at BU and MIT have re-engineered the toilet seat to be antimicrobial and fully automated. They say it's affordable, under $100. Might this be the answer to Boston's devastating lack of public restrooms? We'll open the lines to ask you that, and if you have any secret spots that you go to, since there are no public restrooms, or almost none around here. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7, GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Aisha Harris is a culture critic and co-host of NPR's hit podcast, Pop Culture Happy Hour. She grew up in suburban Connecticut, watching shows like the Powerpuff Girls and listening to her parents play and often sing a lot of Stevie Wonder. Next time on 1A, we talk to her about her new book, Wannabe, and hear more about the pop culture that shaped who she is today.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Watershed Informatics, providing scientists with bioinformatics solutions for multi-omics data analysis. To learn more or to schedule a demo of their platform, you can visit watershed.ai. And Babson College. With a Babson MBA, you can build entrepreneurial skills and help make an impact at the school ranked #1 in entrepreneurship by U.S. News & World Report. More at babson.edu/MBA.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. 2 engineers, as Marjorie said, at BU and MIT have re-engineered the toilet seat to be antimicrobial and hands-free. Unlike other elite automatic toilet seats, they say it'll be affordable. Price point of $95 for home and commercial
That's right.
models.
It opens and closes.
But even if this works, it does not fill the hole, so to speak. That's a poor choice of words. It does not solve the problem that Marjorie identified a minute ago with the mayor, which is there just not enough public restrooms, not just in Boston, but in surrounding communities. You take your kids to the swan boats, you go for a stroll along the Esplanade. How do you come up with a scheme to convince a private business or a hotel concierge that you're not so sketchy that you can't use their bathroom? So we want to know what your secrets are. When you're in Boston or Cambridge or Brookline or any community in greater Boston, what's your secret to be able to get yourself or your kid or whomever into a place where you can actually go to the bathroom? The number's 877-301-8097. You know, those public things. I don't know if we still have one in Harvard Square. They're $250,000.
Yeah, that's right.
They are allegedly self-cleaning, but from what I understand, they're closed down all the time because they're pretty disgusting.
They're pretty disgusting.
And
that is
if
true.
you go to City Hall in Cambridge, you can go to the bathroom.
That's nice.
I believe if you go to City Hall in Boston, you can go to the bathroom. It's sort of out of the way. And by the way, in all fairness, if you go to the city's website, they do list in every single community, broken down by community, the limited number of public restrooms that are there. But it's clearly not enough. I mean, the mayor acknowledged that a minute ago. So what do you do?
This story says just the opposite. Axios Boston, which, by the way, is a great website for people that want to get some quick local news in the morning. Cambridge and Brookline do not appear to have public bathrooms listed on their websites.
Boston does.
Boston does, yes.
Boston does. I just looked at it. Yeah.
Yes, but Cambridge and Brookline do not, which is really outrageous. But in any case, it's a big problem around here. Now, I want to mention before we get to the problem around here and any secrets people might have, that bring their kids to swan boats, and you can't find a bathroom anywhere close to there. These people at MIT, it's called Cleana, C-L-E-A-N-A, and the toilet seat raises or lowers itself to avoid unwelcome splashes or prevent objects from falling accidentally into the toilet bowl.
But it doesn't give you a bathroom. So what?
It
So if
doesn't
you
give
have a
but I
bathroom,
just
it's a
wanna point
nice
out-
seat.
I just want to point out that this is a wonderful thing for people who, I happen to know someone quite well who has dropped their cell phone in the toilet on many occasions.
That'd be Marjorie. Now, by the way, the one
It would
thing
not
Marjorie
be
left
Marjorie.
out of the Boston Axios
Yeah.
story is, do you see on the second page it says there are bathrooms by the public pools? What they meant to say is there are bathrooms in the public pools.
No, they're by
That's
the public
problem.
pools, so people aren't peeing in the pool.
I understand that.
Yeah.
877-301-8970. And by the way, the one restroom that we apparently had on the Common, I think, remember a couple of years ago we had this
Yes.
discussion? The Earl of Sandwich. Essentially converted a urinal to a sandwich place. That's appetizing, I should say.
It's very
So where there
appetizing.
once was a urinal,
That's
there's
done.
now
That's
a
gone.
place you can get a
Yeah.
sandwich, but you cannot
You know what I
go to
didn't
the
know?
bathroom. What?
I didn't know that fire stations have public bathrooms
knew
in
that.
Boston.
I knew
So
that.
I didn't know you could go into a firehouse and use the bathroom. And then some hotels and restaurants and office spaces are listed on the Boston.
What do you do? Forget your kids; they're all grown now.
Well,
what
I
do you do?
never go anywhere. So I don't have to worry about it. You know, I never go anywhere really anymore. So I don't have to worry about it.
Oh,
When
you
I
mean
did,
you don't? Oh, wait, I thought you meant you don't go to the bathroom anywhere. No, I'm serious. You meant you don't go out anywhere.
That's right.
If you go to a restaurant,
but
they have a
when
bathroom.
we would go places with my children when my children were young, like the swan boats, which many people are very fond of, you are really stuck.
Well, you know what
really
the key
stuck.
is, by the way, the only thing I've ever perfected, I'm fairly good at this, you walk into a hotel lobby,
Yep.
you look at your watch if you have one or a phone, and then you look around like you're waiting
That's
for
right.
somebody, and then once the people who work there get the sense that you're actually waiting for somebody, then you can make a beeline
Right.
for the bathroom.
But if you are a mother walking in with 2 or 3 kids,
That's a problem.
they know
That's a problem.
the jig is up and they look at you very suspiciously. Mary from Salem, you are first on the Aware of the Public Toilets Hour here on Boston Public Radio.
Hey, Mary.
What a privilege.
For who? Us or
anyway.
you?
No, to be first.
Oh, you're very
good.
kind. Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
I think this is an easy one. When you're in Boston, you pick a very crowded restaurant, and you go up to the hostess or host and put your name on the wait list.
Brilliant.
That's a good one.
Whether it's your name or some other name.
Brilliant.
And you say, gee, while I'm waiting, I really need to use the restroom. And then you disappear.
You're a genius. That is really an obvious, and no, I'm serious. That is a great one, Mary, and a great way to start off the conversation. Thank you so much for the call. We appreciate it.
I've not tried that. That is a great idea.
No, but it's also pretty simple, and it's not intimidating. I mean, sometimes you go into the hotel, you get a little intimidated, but that is a good and easy one, by the way. You just make sure there's a line.
877-301-8970.
What if they say we have a table for you right away? Then you're screwed.
Then you are.
You have to eat first.
No, you could say that you're feeling ill. You could say you suddenly tested positive for COVID in the bathroom.
That's great.
And now you have to go home.
Mary, thanks for the call.
877-301-8970 is the number to call or text us on the terrible dearth of public restrooms in downtown Boston. Marty from Brookline. Hi, Marty.
Hey guys, back again.
Hi there.
Once in a while. Love your show.
Thank you.
I know you guys know me.
Oh, Marty, how are you? I didn't recognize your voice for a second. How are you, Marty?
Yeah,
One of the
that's
great
me.
lawyers of our
Hanging in
time
there.
for people who need it. Hi, Marty. What's up?
Hanging in, plugging away. Some of you may remember that I was what used to be called the selectman
We knew
in
that.
Brookline in the
Yep.
80s. Now, of course, politically correct is select board member.
Yes.
So, but we had a problem with people being excluded from the McDonald's bathroom in Coolidge Corner if they were not a patron. And we passed a bylaw that every restaurant has to have a bathroom open to the public.
Wow.
And, yeah.
Wait a second, Marty, a bathroom open to the public even if you're not patronizing that restaurant?
Correct.
Wow. Did you know that? You live
I
in
did
Brookline.
not. I did not know that. And I just mentioned that Brookline doesn't go into this on their website.
So, Marty, is that honored or honored in the breach?
It's in the,
Is that honored or is that honored in the breach? What's
Oh,
the
yeah, no, it's honored. In fact, every new restaurant has to comply with it and
Love it.
build a bathroom.
Marty, it's good to hear from you. That is great news.
So every restaurant that already exists now in Brookline, if somebody's walking down the street and they have a couple of kids with them, they have to let them go in and use the bathroom.
You got it.
Wow.
Love it. So the solution to your question,
Well, I
thank
guess
you,
I
Marty.
just have to hang around Brookline more. I don't
Or
have
if
to
you're
worry
at the
about it.
Swan Boats, you just get on the subway and you go out to Brookline, go to the nearest restaurant, and
Yeah, no, that
do
used
what
to
you gotta
be
do.
an option. That wasn't before the subways started going like 15 miles an hour all the time.
Well, you can run the Brookline then.
You can run
That's
to
your
Brookline.
choice.
Yeah, I remember, God, back, I'm dating myself, but the subways were free. If you were going from downtown to the outskirts to Newton or to Brookline, you could take the subways
Well,
outbound
because you paid on the way down.
for free. You paid on the way down, you
yeah.
could get them for free on the way back.
Thanks, Marty. Appreciate it. 877-301-8970. So 2 creative solutions already. One legal and one sort of extra legal, I guess you could say.
Did you know, is this person talking about Bernie Sanders being
What?
a crusader for toilets like healthcare or a human right? Or I think
I didn't
the
know
person may be making a joke. I'm not clear what they're saying.
Well, they should be a human right.
But this person is also saying there's no public bathrooms in Salem either, so apparently this is a problem everywhere you go. And Paul from Worcester says he takes Ruby the Wonder Dog to Boston from Norwood fairly often. Both Back Bay and South Station were my go-to places. And they let him go in there with his dog.
Really?
Yes.
That's rather incredible. And so what, does the dog go in the bathroom? Is that
The dog does not go in the bathroom. They allow him to take the dog into the bathroom.
Oh, you do. Liz in
from
Arlington. Liz.
Hi.
How do you?
I'm very good. How
Good.
are you?
We're excellent. Thank you for calling. What's up?
So I have multiple sclerosis,
Mm-hmm.
and generally what I do is I appeal to people's mercy. I tell them that I'm probably going to wet myself if I don't use the restroom soon.
Oh, Liz.
And would you please let me use your restroom? And they always abide by that.
No one has ever said no, I hope. Have they, Liz?
No, they haven't. They always appeal to my wishes and allow me to use theirs.
I'm glad it works out. Liz, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
You know, this is a mom who says when her son was little, she would tell him to pretend he had to use the bathroom.
Oh, that's a great. So
and
she
she'd
could
bring him in, and
That's
then
good.
she would use the bathroom herself because no one ever says no to a cute little boy with glasses.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. 877-301-8970 is the number on the bathrooms in Boston. No bathrooms in Boston. Sally from Lincoln, thank you for calling.
Hi, Sally.
Hi, folks.
Hi.
So, yeah, being a woman of a certain age, I have, located all the bathrooms in greater Boston and surrounding area, I think. And I was, on the Esplanade yesterday and in the Public Garden and on the Commons. And I don't know if it was just because it was Juneteenth, but there were a whole array of portable bathrooms lined up along Charles Street on the Common, and then again on the Esplanade in a couple of different locations that were perfectly clean, portable toilets with toilet paper, which was amazing.
Wow.
And as far as using bathrooms in a coffee shop or a restaurant, my MO is just do it and don't ask questions. Just go. And, I take my dog into the bathroom in various, coffee shops all the time. Nobody ever says anything. As long as you just, do it as if, it's okay.
Sally, can we go back to your first point? I don't want to be overly dramatic, but let me be honest. If I had to go to the bathroom really badly, and my choice was exploding or using a porta potty on the Charles, I would explode. I mean,
Maybe you haven't done it recently. I mean, these are clean as they were as clean as my bathroom at home, which admittedly isn't
really.
Yeah, some of them are nice.
I've never seen Sally. I hope you're right. And I'm sure you're telling the truth. I hope you're right, and thank you very much for the call. Wow.
Listen to this. We always park in the Boston Common garage and have a toddler potty in the minivan with tinted back windows to be used as the family bathroom for the day.
Wait, what do they do again?
They have a toddler potty in the minivan, and they all use it when they come to Boston as a family bathroom for the day. That's what.
Why are you smiling?
That's
Would
what
you
they're
find
doing.
that appealing?
Well, I would not, but that's okay. I mean, and Maureen from Dover says you should pretend you're pregnant, because she points out that when she was pregnant, no one denies an expectant mother a bathroom. So that's another
How
thing.
do you pretend you're pregnant?
Just put something big underneath your stomach and march in there. Yeah, and several people are doing the same thing that one of the earlier callers says. They go into a restaurant that looks really busy. Now, their person was to say they wanted to be on the wait list, the person that called, but this person just walks up to the host and says that their party is waiting for you inside the restaurant. Then you slip past them and walk with great confidence toward the restroom. That's from Nancy in Framingham. So there you go.
You didn't know about this Brookline thing that Marty said,
absolutely
did you?
did not.
That's really spectacular.
Well, you know why? There's no more Brookline tab. Apparently there's some online papers now that are
Same
newer.
in Cambridge.
Yes, which are great. But I'm sorry that I think the ordinance about the bathrooms may have passed before the online papers came to be online. Dana Randolph says he stacks boxes of documents to create a private space. And Tom in New Hampshire says, what's the problem? There's a Starbucks on every corner.
You want to know something?
What?
The Starbucks in Central Square, they may deny this, but people who know much more about the community, that particular part of the community than I do, say that Starbucks closed because there were people, homeless people in particular, who had to go to the bathroom and using the bathroom, and they decided they'd rather close the damn thing down than let people who needed it use it, which is rather horrible, it seems to me.
Peter on the North Shore.
Yeah.
I tell my students I simply wear Depends during marathon teaching of multiple classes in a row. Everyone can wear Depends too around town.
That's a wonderful solution.
That's a wonderful idea.
John on the road, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about the dearth of public restrooms in Greater Boston. Hey there.
Yes, Jim, it used to be, and I'm not sure if it still is, that if you had a common victualer's license to prepare and sell food, you had to use allow the public to use your restrooms.
I don't think, wait, before you continue, my understanding is you had to have a restroom for your customers. Your contention is that all restaurants had to let any member of the public, customer or not, use the restroom?
Correct. That's the way it used to be.
Oh, I don't know about that. Okay.
And during the pandemic, I was on the road, and I needed to use the bathroom.
Okay.
And I was denied at 3 different national chains.
Okay.
And so I called the Board of Health in the town. And double-checked. And they let the people know that either they opened up their bathrooms to the public or they shut down.
And what happened?
That's what happened. They opened the bathrooms.
So wait a second. You had enough you had to go to the bathroom. I don't mean to be graphic. You had enough time to go to 3 different places and call the Board of Health and then go back to
I called the Board of Health later.
Oh, okay.
And I used a different place that allowed the public to use their bathroom.
Excellent. Good research. Well done, John. Thank you very much for the call.
Listen to this. Where is Public Toilet is an app for your phone. It shows you where the toilets are and uses the location on your phone.
You know, what are you looking at me, Jamie, like that? You know about that?
Yeah.
There is, by the way, let's repeat. We don't want to, even though the mayor said they have to build more public toilets, on the city's website, there are broken down neighborhood by neighborhood, every single location where there are public toilets. My Comrex is down, Jamie. 877-301-8097. No one seems to be terribly upset about this like you and I are. Everybody seems to have worked out a solution.
Here's somebody who's upset.
What'd they say?
Much like everything else, folks abuse public bathrooms and businesses don't want to pay for the upkeep. People are unhelpful and cheap. This is a disgrace. So there you go. Grocery stores have public restrooms, says Woody, the UPS driver, who certainly should know.
I know that
he's in his UPS truck all day long. Target has big bathrooms, but I can't go to Target anymore because they stopped. They took some of their Pride stuff off. They basically cowed down to these, that's the word.
Cowed in the face of.
Cowed in the face of. Thank you. Cowed in the face of.
Thank you.
These people that were anti-gay and anti-trans. It was really disgraceful. But prior to that, Target was a place you could always use the bathroom. Kate in Rhode Island. What do you think, Kate?
Hey, Kate.
Hi. So I'm a 19-year-old woman. So when I need to use the bathroom at some place that doesn't have a public restroom, I always find a worker who's around my age, who's a woman, and I just tell her that I'm on my period and I'm about to bleed through. And normally they're pretty sympathetic.
That's a good one.
But wait a second. But Kate, does it not trouble you? It's sort of like the woman who said, pretend you're pregnant. You have to pretend at least certain times that you're having your period, even though you're not. You seem okay. Are you troubled by that or not?
Absolutely not.
Not.
I think I deserve to be able to use the bathroom
You
if
do.
I have to.
No, by the way, I didn't mean were you troubled that you might be lying. I meant were you troubled that you had to resort to that sort of strategy to be able to use a bathroom?
I mean, to a certain extent, but I think it's fun to play a little pretend sometimes.
That's
Excellent.
right. That's right.
No, Kate, that's a wonderful opportunity to play pretend. Thank you for the call. We really appreciate it.
Okay, supposedly, I'm looking it up now, there's another app called Flush. It's supposed to tell you where the bathrooms are. Have you heard about that, Jim?
No, I don't know.
Yep,
Well,
well,
Jamie is not doing AI images of me looking for a
Here it
bathroom,
is.
so maybe he can do this.
Flush Toilet Finder.
What do
Right
you
here.
find?
There's a Flush Toilet Finder.
And then what do you say? Here I am.
Well, I don't want to get it actually on my phone, but
You
you
don't?
can get it on your phone. It would tell you exactly where you can go to find bathrooms, loos, and WCs, as they call them over in Great Britain, right near you. So
We
there
have
you
some
go.
sound, by the way, that is relatively relevant to this. This is sound from the Seinfeld reunion. Remember, it was on
I do.
Curb Your Enthusiasm,
Yep.
season 7. Turns out that after the show's finale, George Costanza went on to make millions, then lose it all on an app we wish existed in the real world. Kramer, then George, then Seinfeld.
So what's the big deal? You lost a couple of million.
It was more than a couple.
Well, it was more than a great idea. An iPhone application that leads you via your GPS to the nearest acceptable toilet wherever you are in the world.
The iToilet. Well, I thought of it.
The iToilet. 877-301-8970.
Here's Andy the mailman. I don't see what the problem is. The one time I went to see the Southeast St. Patrick's Day Parade, the multitudes of parade watchers had no problem relieving themselves right on the sidewalk
know,
there.
that's pretty horrible,
And that is
too.
probably true. I hope they have a lot of porta. I haven't been to the St. Patrick's Day Parade in years, but I would hope they would have a bunch of porta potties over
How do you
there.
feel?
wouldn't
You didn't. How do you feel about porta potties?
Well, not
You said
great.
you've seen clean ones. How many clean ones have you
Well,
ever
if you go to a
seen?
nice party,
Well,
I've been to
I know what you're
snazzy
I know.
parties
Well, most
or weddings where they
Excuse me, if
actually
you-
have these
please.
really nice.
If you're at a snazzy party or wedding, I assume there's gonna be a place to pee.
Right.
Okay. I'm talking about you're out in the world kind of
We
thing.
always feel a little funny about it though, because what they're really telling you is I don't want you in my house.
That is exactly
Yeah,
what they're
that's
telling
what they're
you.
telling you.
Yeah.
They don't want the unwashed party guests.
You know how much that doesn't matter to me as long as I get to a toilet?
Janet from her car.
Thank you.
for calling.
Hey, Janet.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hi.
I'm a fan of your show.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm calling because I'm almost embarrassed to say what I do in Boston. Because,
Please.
My husband used to work in Boston, downtown in Old City Hall.
Yeah.
And I always could go to the bathroom there. So if it was the weekend, I'd have my husband, I'd say, would you come
That's
with me? And he would get me into his office, and I could always go. Well, my husband retired.
Oh.
And I thought, what am I going to do?
Selfish.
And I like a really nice bathroom.
So do I.
Like, I'd really enjoy that. And
Me too.
so he used to belong to the Athenaeum, the private
Oh,
library.
yes.
On Beacon Street,
Yes.
one of the greats.
So anyway, I expanded it to a family membership now. So that's where I go to the bathroom. And that place is fabulous.
Wait a second. By the way, this is not free. You paid extra money.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm embarrassed to say. But we belong. My husband always belonged, and he enjoys it, and he takes books out, and we hang out there. It's a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful place. I was there a few
Janet,
months ago.
How much does it cost to join the Athenaeum?
I'm embarrassed to say it's over $400 for a family, I think, a year.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
It's
For
like
a
she
whole
bought her
year
own
of
bathroom
the
in
entire
downtown
family having a
Boston.
place to go to the John if you're down in downtown
Janet, you're an
Boston.
honest woman.
I'm with
Thank
you,
you.
Janet. There's Jim in the AI looking around the lobby of a hotel for a bathroom. He's looking at his phone.
Why don't you see if Spencer is looking for a hotel and a bathroom and see how he looks?
Yeah.
We're done,
And,
Marjorie.
we are done, but I just
Yeah.
want to mention the Flush app if you want to know where the bathrooms are.
And it really works?
Apparently it does. I haven't
Okay.
checked it out, but a couple of
Okay,
texters
fine.
say it does. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us today at the Boston Public Library. Thank you to people that came down to the Boston Public Library.
Thank you all for coming, yes.
You can find Boston Public Radio wherever you download your podcast. And by the way, we have trying something new for the past few days. We have a Best of Boston Public Radio podcast. Yeah, our colleague Zoe has done it. She's done a great job. It's in the exact same feed. Check it out. Our colleague, as we said, Zoe Matthews, has been working on it really hard. It brings you some of the best moments of the show in under 40 minutes instead of having to listen to the whole 3 hours. And really, who wants to do that? Tune in tomorrow.
That is not exactly the way to market it. A lot of people would like to do that.
Okay.
The way you market it and then say, however, if you have a short amount of time, you might just want to listen to Best of.
Okay, tomorrow, NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Boston Globe relationship and advice columnist Meredith Goldstein. She's going to talk about money in relationships. Lynn, City Councilor, is going to join us, and a Quincy City Councilor for an AAPI local government panel, and members of the male vocal group Renaissance Men and Caro's Dance Theater ahead of their show, Folktales, Fables, and Feasts with live music in Studio 3. We want to thank Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, additional support from Shay Sullivan, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jane Bologna, and the BPL team, Angelica Marrero, Sandra Lopez Burke, and Steve Baracci. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow and have a great day.
Thank you so much.